Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to pick up from the bottom of Daf Lamed Amud Beis. Emir Tzashem, try to get all the way till the end of Lamed Zayin Amud Beis, the top of Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. So we're going to pick up by the Siman. There's a parenthesis on around 6 lines on the bottom of Lamed Amud Beis. Siman, Sanigron, Bur, Gazalta, Mirma. We're going to see 13 different halachos, really 14, because we have the Dayan and the Eid, but 13 different halachos regarding Midva Sheker Terchak teaches us certain dinim. Taner Rabbanan, minayin ledayin shelo yasis anigron ledvarov. We're talking about a scenario where a dayan knows that he's really making a mistake. However, what he wants to say is, let me see if I can defend it, etc. Tamalayma midva sheker terchak. Minayin ledayin shelo yeshiv tamid bur lefanav. He shouldn't have an ignorant tamid in front of him. Tamalayma midva sheker terchak. Minayin ledayin. Here it's a dayan shidei lechaver shu gazlin. He knows that his fellow dayan is a gazlan. Mechein eid, and same halach would apply ben eid shedei bechaver shu gazlan. How do we know minayin shelo yitztarf? Yimay tamalaymar osa the halacha midvar sheker terchak. Minayin ledayin. How do we know shedei bedin? Shumaruma shelo yamahoyel. The Maisi knows the procedures are all off. However, he says, let me make a chap. Let the eidim come. The eidim. Achachtenu v'yekoylo talui b'tzavar eidim. The Hainu, the Rashi's masber shall shelas alvoin on top of Lamed Aleph and Aleph. Let it be the eidim's issue. He'll take the sin, not the dayan. Tamalayim, if he knows that it's wrong, he should stop it because of midva sheker terchak. Now we're going to see another 8 different halachos. Another actually 9 different halachos. Siman plus the Talmud is going to be another 3. V'tlas ba'alechoy. Then we have the smartut shamei omat. Again, let's continue in Island Talmud Sheyoshev and a rabbi. They used to sit tamid in front of the Rebbe. In such a case, Tamalayma midva sheker terchak. Minayin letalmid Sherayis rabbi. He sees his Rebbe by mistake shetoy bedin. Shelo yaymar amtin loy. Let me wait. Chigmer nevestarenu of nenem shali. And I'll rebuild everything at the Sheyikra. Didn't al shmi. Rather, he says, Rebbe, didn't we learn kach v'kach? And his Rebbe will understand he's making a mistake. Tamalayma. What do we know this from midva sheker terchak? Minayin letalmid Shamalei Rabbi Yadei Atabi Shem Nicely Mea Money Einim Vad. They'll never lie. Money Yishlu Tzaploini Vein Lov Alei Dechot Minayin Shali Tzarf Imoy. Tamalayim. The Gemara is going to question this. Midva sheker terchak. Frek Gemara. Hi midva sheker terchak nafka. Havadi. He's lying. Shikurim kamishakri. V'rachmana Amat says in the pasuk very clearly. Loisana v'rechei sheker. So what's the havamina? On that the Gemara answers. You know what the scenario is where the Rav is telling the Talmud as follows. Like a going to Amarle. Zok the Rav to the Talmud. Vadai chatzad isli. I agree. I only have 1 8, and we all know an 8 that we're going to see can only be mechayiv shua, but it can't pull out money. But what I want to do is I want to basically trick the defendant. I'm going to bring you as keilu you're another 8, like that. The guy's going to say, "Oi, there's 2 8dim. I might as well admit." Meanwhile, you never really had the havamina to give edus. Vadai chatzad isli v'saat. You should come asata kum hasam. You stay quiet. However, he's going to think that you're giving edus. He'll be ma'ideh. We're not saying anything. If you it's still aser. Mishum shenemar midva sheker terchak. Minayin lenoishi b'chaver money. Another halacha. Shelo yemer. A person, he owes his friend $100, and what he's going to do is, let me tell him I owe him $200. Let me tell the person that owes me $100 that he really owes me $200, and then he's going to be moideh b'mixas. That's the halacha. And once there's halacha on Lamed Aleph, once the halacha moideh mixas, I can throw in him other Shevuos. So how do we know this halacha? Minayin lenoish b'chaveiroi moneh v'tahanim asam shelo yemer achberenu bevezdin v'oidel lechutz. Oh, sorry. Kedei sheyoidel li b'moneh v'yischaylu shvuah v'gagalo shvuah makam acher. Again, the halacha is and what tamalayimar midva sheker terchak. Another halacha. Minayin lenoish b'chaveiroi moneh v'tahanim asayim. A person, he knows that he owes Reuven only $100, but Reuven's playing games, and he's saying you owe me $200. Maybe he wants to throw him on a shvuah. He says, you know what? Let me play it right back. I'm actually going to deny everything, and that's a bezdin. I'll give him $100. So how do we know you don't do that? I don't want him to happen. Basically, 3 people, they're owed $100 from Reuven. They know they're never going to get the money, so they figured, let's do as follows. One's going to be Baldin, the other people are going to be Eidim. Like that, we'll be able to get our money. Like that, they'll split it up. Midvar sheker terchak. Minayin l'shnaim shebol adin. You have 2 people coming to Bezdin. Echad lavas sar smartutin, which is basically kamat shmatas. Ve'echalafish, itzlis, which is worth basmei amon. The point is, he's wearing very, very fancy clothing, so the discrepancy is so much. But if a person, today, they say, if a person's wearing a suit and this, it doesn't really make a difference if it's a brand name, not a brand name. The point is, it's very, the contrast is very sharp. Scheiner, they tell him, lavash kamaisai. Either you dress like him, or you'll be a shea kamaischa, or give him fancy clothing. Tamalayim midva shekatercha. Who tell him taka. Shlufu piskum chayu. I guess these guys were wearing very fancy shoes. But first, take off your fancy shoes, and then come back to best. Minayin ledayin. Again, we know this. Minayin lebaldin. He shouldn't even clarify his word. Shalayatim dvar ledayin koidim shava baldin chaveroi. Tamalaymar. Midva sheker terchak, and this is actually the final of the halachas of midva sheker terchak. Rav Kahana will learn these two halachas of the dying from where, masni from where. It says in the pasuk, Miloi, he says number one, you should not accept a false eidos, and he also learns that it is what? Laisasi, you should not cause it to be accepted in eidos. That's how you know also the halachas of a dying. It says in the pasuk, Vasher loitoiv asa b'soich amov. Rav wants to say, Amaz zahaba b'harsha. Now, our show, we all know, Rashi's masber, that it's very hard to negotiate. If you ever want to negotiate well, you don't negotiate for yourself. You rather hire somebody, owner's rep. It's much easier to negotiate, much better. So the halachas, you shouldn't do that. Avad, if you can't, you're in a different country, etc., it's mutter. The point you're trying to do is you're trying to take advantage. So he's not doing good. Even though you know there are people saying that it's their field, but you know you're a tough guy in town. No one's going to fight with you, so you don't care to take such a field. Rashi says, he's very powerful. This is a person, the Mishnah tells us, now, the Mishnah tells us quite extensive. The Gemara's question, Lafuke who is a person that cannot say Eidus? Lafuke mai, Amar Papa, Lafuke melech. We learned this already. Soim tasim alecha melech. We went through this in Sanhedrin. It's a bizayin, etc. Rav Achabar Yaakov Amar Lafuke, someone who's Masechet bekuvya. Whether it's a gambler, he doesn't understand business. We also discussed this in Sanhedrin extensively. Manda Masechet bekuvya. Kol shekein melech, which is the Raisa, should not give Eidus Manda melech. However, Masechet bekuvya midaraisa be'etzem mechse chazit. However, it's Rabbanon who dipaslu. We said in the Mishnah, Bifnei Bezdin, Vishaloi Bifnei Bezdin. We went through this by Riches, the whole halacha, Bifnei Bezdin, and not Bifnei Bezdin. Piatzim, Piacherim, Finachayev, we saw Rameir, we saw Chachamim, etc., the extensive machlekes. So, Zoktim, what's the machlekes? Chachamim, Rameir, Maika Miflgi. So, Amrua, Rabbana, Kamei, Papa, the machlekes is as follows, Bedon Mina, Umina, Bedon Mina, Uki Basra, Kamiflgi. Which means to say is, we're going to learn halacha Aleph from Beis. The question is if you schlep a weiter or not. Rav Meir Savar Dun Mino Mi Pikadon. What is the halachas by Pikadon? Ma Pikadon, we know the halacha is Mushbam Bi Atzmoi. The halacha is Yechayiv. So too, we're going to schlep it to Eidos. So too, of Eidos Mushbam Bi Atzmoi Chayiv. Umina, we're going to take it a step further and say Ma Pikadon. Bein Bebezdin. Ubein Shaloi Bebezdin. So too, we're going to schlep it back to Eidos. Of Eidos, Bein Bebezdin, Bein Shaloi Bebezdin, you're going to be Chayiv. Again, a carbon. Rabban and Savi, no. Dun Mino Vuki Basra. We understand the halachas of what ma pikadon. We can say mushma piatzmei chayiv. So too, of eidos mushma piatzmei chayiv. That itself is not a machlekes or mer chachama because they were learning from pikadon. However, v'uki basra ma mushma piacherim bebezdin and shaloi bebezdin loy. Here we're changing it from yourself, opposed to learning by pikadon. The question is, do you go to pikadon or we go right back to what we're learning over here by Eidos? So we're saying, Ma mushma piachem bezdin shaloi bezdin loy. Mushma piatzmoi, we're going to say bebezdin in shaloi bebezdin loy. That's what the Gemara wants to say. Should be in the machlokes Rameir and Chacham. We're on the top Lamed Alpha Mebes. Amalu Rapapa imi pikadoin gamli rabban on the water kulam loy pligi de domino mino. So what would be the machlokes? Alahainu time of the rabban is as follows: the ma'iselo bekavachaymer. Umam piachem daloch is yechayiv. So kol shekein piatzim lekol shekein. And now we have the kavachaymer, the ma'iselo kavachaymer. We say that what dayoi. We all know the halacha is a dayoi, that you cannot go more extensive just because you have a kavachaymer. We're going to say rather halacha is a dayoi and dinli is kanidoin. Ma mushma bepiachem bebezdin in shaloi bebezdin loy. So too af mushma piatzma. We're going to say the same halachos bebezdin in shaloi bebezdin loy. This is what Rav Papa wants a taina for Rabban. Amalei Rabban Rav Papa. Me matzis, can you really say Amos delab b'dum mino mino pligi? V'atanan, we have a Mishnah. We're going to see in Lamed Vav and Beis. Gabi pikadon. It says as follows: Shevuos pikadon noyages ba'anashim and ubenashim. Whether it's men, women, etc., it doesn't make a difference. By Eidus, we know you have to be kosher leid. A ish is not kosher, etc. V'erchaykin and b'kroivin. Whether it's b'chsheir and b'psulin. All these halachas pikadon works. B'fnei bezdin, v'shaloi b'fnei bezdin. Mipiatzmoi, and that's the halacha in piatzmoi. However, which is basically like our Mishnah, it's almost the same quote as our Mishnah. Adarabba Rashi and Lamed Vav and Beis says it's basically quoting our Mishnah over, just over there, it's by pikadon. However, they say, the halacha is, kivan shekafa b'y chayev. However, this is what Rabban is telling back to Rav Papa. Much men piachem pikadon, we know the Rabban in the chayev. Isn't it learning from Lav the Gamal Edus and Vishma Mino? What do we see? Shma Mino bidun Mino pligi. So you clearly see from Shevuos pikadon very clearly the halacha is the Mino is the machlekes. On that, the Gemara answers, no. You're right. Ma'ahin, from the Mishnah by pikadon, I agree, we see that's the machlekes. What all Rav Papa is trying to say is, Mahal lekol amashmi Mino. From the Mishnah you're trying to bring over here, you can't tell me that's a raya, but Avado, he agrees to the concept of Dun Mino. However, over here by Eidus, we could say maybe it's not mitam d'gzeir shava. That's the whole Rav Papa's taina. Rather, it's from the Kavachomer. But what comes out of the Maskana of the Gemara is that Rav Papa Avada agrees that the Machlekes Rabban and Rameir is Taka Dun Mino. The Chayavin al Zadon Hashvuah. Mino and Amelia, how do you know Yichayim such a case? The Tanah Rabbanan, how do you know Yichayim a carbon? Bekulon Nemer Behen V'nelam. Whenever we're discussing the Torah, the halachas of carbon, oil v'yayred, it says V'nelam. And over here by Eidos, V'kan loy nemer b'v'nelam, to tell us what's the halacha. L'chayv l'meizik k'shoygik. It's a big chiddush. We're going to see in l'chad davar elo b'chidushay that by a carbon, by Eidos, you're going to be chayiv even though you did it by meizik. V'al shkagasam zadan Eidos heichidam. What's the case of a shkaga? But you know what you're doing. Shkagasam zadan Eidos. I'm reviewing the Rav. Rashi brought this down. I know the Shevuos is asur. I don't know if I'm chayav carbon or not. So that we say it's a shaygik. Ve'en chayavin al shkagasak reduso, which means to say in a plain shaygik. The way our mashal is that you'll take a pass a polygraph test. When someone truly believes he's saying the emes, he'll pass it. But Lamaisi was wrong. So what happened was we learned the Gemara in Daf Chavav. There was a shayla over there of Kana. Rav Asi had a machlokes. Not only that, if the halacha is if a person makes Beishoygig, if you chayiv carbon or not, and we saw that each one made a shvuah, and Rav Taka said you're not chayiv carbon in such a case, and he said, why, did I say shvuah sheker? And Rav told him, no, you didn't make a shvuah sheker, because Lamaisa, you 100% believed in it. So Frektigmar, why do we say that over there? Why does Rav have to come to tell us the halachas? What do you mean, they don't know the halachas? How do you understand Rav Kahana and the Rav Asi? Rav Kahana and Rav Asi had a machlekes, l'chayr tzim afresh Mishnah. And that thing where answers like, why? Because Avagad the Tanan, even though we have a Mishnah, it's that's Dafka over here of a Hassam. Where was the case in Chavav? It was a Stam Shvuah. You know what I'll tell us? Afilu Shkagasa called you still chayiv a carbon. Kamashmu and Rav told them, no. The halach is you're not chayiv a carbon. Then we saw the whole shak of Atarya over there. If it's Bechlal considered that he made a false Shvuah or not, and Rav told him on that it wasn't considered a shvuah, rather it's considered einus. Zok tehelig Mishnah. Shvuas ha'edus ketzat. What is the scenario of shvuas ha'edus? We all know it's a separate minatayra. It separates the shvuas ha'edus from all other shvuas. Amar l'shnayim. A person goes over to Reuven and Shem and says, "Boyu v'hadinu, I want you to give me, come make a shvuah." V'hadinu, and they respond, "Shvuah she'ein ani yaydin l'cha'edus." They say, "We don't have any edus for you." And he says, Mashbiani Aleichem Amr Amen. The halach is this is the case. Even 5 times. If it was outside of Bezdin, Bala Bezdin, Bahaidu, by the time you slept in the Bezdin, they were Maida. The halach is Pturin. Kafru. We're going to see why. Chayavin al kol achas va'achas. We're going to see why you chayav and all that. Hishbi alen hey pamim. Bifnei bezdin v'kafru eina chayavin al achas. Again, we're going to have to see what's the chiluk. Why suddenly over here you only chayav once? Amr b'shim matam hoyul ve'einam yichaylim lachzav l'haydas. We all know once a person says something to bezdin, kivan shehigid shuv eina chayzer magid mashenkin chutz lebezdin. A person can die and be kaifer. That's why over here, once you said it once, there's no real inyan in being kaifer, nachamol, and therefore you only chayiv once. Kafru shneim ke'echot. We're going to see exactly ka'echot, techedei dibur, not techedei dibur, Rabbi Yaisi. We're going to go through this in the Gemara. But the point is, they're both kaifer, they're saying, we don't know what you're talking about, we don't have any edus. The halacha is shnein chayavin. Bezeh chazeh, the Rishon's chayiv, but the Sheni, however, is part because the Rishon already stopped the edus. In order to be chayiv, there's one akuda is, in order to be mechayiv shuas edus, we're going to have to see, it has to be tviyas moment, it has to be that I'm losing money. Otherwise, now I'm only one aid, l'chayra, is nothing to gain besides a shvuah. Therefore, in Potter, the Gemara is going to question, l'chayra, it's mivay, it's pashut, you should be Potter. We're going to see in the Gemara, Yetz Hashem. Kafar echad v'hayde echad. You have two Eidim, Reuven Hashem, and one is Maida. Shimon's the other one is not Maida. The halacha is kaifer chayiv. Hayishtei kitei Eidim. There are two groups of Eidim, so we have four people in the room. Kafar, Ari Scheiner, Reuven Hashem, are kaifer v'achakach, then Rav Yehuda kaifer. Kafar Shnia. The halacha is shtein chayavos. Why? Mibnei she'edus yichayil liskayim b'shteim. The nekuda is very simple, on a simplistic level, as long as, again, I would gain with your Eidos tviyas mamoin, you are chayiv a karba. Zok the Heilige Gemara Amar Shmuel. Ra'u shiratzach harein. What happened was, Lamaisa, two of them walk in the street. They suddenly see the Taveh running after them. They're very smart. They understand the reason why they're running is to pull out Shevuos Eidos. Amr loy mata ratzach harein. Why are you even running? He basically responded before he was even Taveh the Eidos. This is the Chiddush. They answer back, Shevuos ein ani yoydin l'cha Eidos. The halacha is pturin until he's Taveh b'peh. Achi yishmu b'piv. We have a bright shilach biad abdoi. Oy shamelam and nitum mashbi ani elechem shematem yoidim lo eidu shetavoyu v'seid arelu pturin. So ad yishmu mipi ataveya until he explicitly says, "Come and give me a testimony." So why would he think otherwise? We're on the top of Lamed Beis Amad Aleph. On that the Gemara says, "Ratzach harein is techalei." You would have a ham, sagadach hamina given the ratzach harein. Let's be real. Why else are you running after me? You know why you're running after me. That's why you told me I don't have any to you. We don't say that until you explicitly say, give me Eidos, the halach is your pot. So the Marva, Namitanina Shevuos Eidos Kates and the Amal Eidim, Bayva Dinu Shuva V'chulei, Dafka, when Omar, when the Taveya itself is moneying it, that's when in your Chayiv a Korban, but Loy Omar, if he doesn't say it explicitly, Loy. Now, on that we're saying, Omar Loyav Dafka. When the person said, Omar, I'll tell you, it's Loyav Dafka. Why? But if you're going to tell me the Amar's Dafka, what's the problem? We're trying to say is we already see this by the case over there by Shevuos Eidos, where it's Dafka Amar. And that thing where it says no, it's Lav Dafka. What are you going to do by Pikadon? Pikadon the Ktani Shevuos Pikadon. Ketzad Amar. Again, over there we have already a case where it explicitly tells them I want to know the Eidos. Over there it's not really Eidos, there it's the Pikadon, but the point is he explicitly says it. Amar loy tainli Pikadon sheish biyadcha. Hachanam, you're going to tell me but that can't be by because then it's pashut even if it's not Omar. Have a kichish by Misa that tells us Kaldu as long as you're lying any way, shape, or form, white lie, black lie, gray lie. The point is you're not being honest, you're chayiv. Ella, rather you're going to have to tell us Omar lav dafka. When it says Omar, it doesn't mean dafka. Hachinami, so to over here, we're trying to say, hey, this is also lav dafka. So Zaktamar, Haima, Iamad Bishlama, the Omar, in the case of where he's asked him in the Mishnah, the Hacha Dafka. I'll tell you, you're right. By Pikadon, it's not Dafka. So why does it say it? Because we use the similar Lashon of Omar, we'll use the Lashon of here Omar. But Avad Omar is Lav Dafka. Eli Amrit Lo Yamad Hasam Dafka. But if you're going to tell me that what? The Lo Yamad Dafka, the Lo Yamad Hacha Dafka, Omar, Lamali. Lemisni, why do you need it twice? And then the answer is, Dim Urcha the Mosa Kamash Malon. The Amar in Echanami is only Urcha de Bosa. Tanik of Shmuel, Rush Bachrein, Amruloi, Mata Bachrein, Shul Sheiner, Eidos, the halacha is Pturin. However, Vim Pipikadon, what is the halacha? The halacha is Chayovin. How is that possible? The answer is, the Kichish Bamisai comes to tell us, no matter what, any way, shape, or form that you're lying, you're Chayiv. Hishbia Aleya and Chomish Pamim, our Mishnah tells us in such a case where a person lies, he made a shul 5 times, and it was in front of Bezdin. And the Rekaifer, the halacha is Ein Chayav and Al Achas. And we said, Rav Shimon says, Hayil the Einam Yechayil Nachsel Haydais. And then we saw the case of Hishbielem Chamish Pamim Chutz LeBezdin Ubal LeBezdin. The halacha is Yiptur. Minolon Zok the Gemara. How do we know that the Kfira beBezdin Hu the Mechayfi? From our Mishnah, it's very clear. Dafka when you kaifa outside of Bezdin. Dafka when you kaifa sorry inside Bezdin. But if it's outside of Bezdin, it's not a problem. How do we know this? Amar Abaya Makra says in the pasuk, Im lo yagid, if he's not going to say the eidos, even nasav, he has to carry the chait. Lo yamarti lecha dafka lebamakom shila magazeh mischayim moment. And where's that? Rabbi said that's in Bezdin. Therefore, it's pashut. You see dafka in Bezdin. Amar Abaya. Yachi Meshvua Gufa Bebezdin. I'll tell you the shvua also. Vishalei Bezdin Light. And the Gemara says Loisakadaitich. Why? The Tanya says in the pasuk La'achas me'ela. We learn l'chai al kolachas v'achas. V'isakadaitich bebezdin. How could that be? You can be chai. We just said in the Mishnah. Kivin sheikah shuvin echayis amagid. V'isakadaitich bebezdin michai v'kolachas v'achas. V'tanan in our Mishnah. Ayishpi alei chamisha palmim pnei bezdin v'kofin chayim v'lachas. And Reb Shimon is masber in the Mishnah. Reb Shimon matam hoil beinu chayim lachas v'loitais. El ashma mino shvua chutz lebezdin. Dafko be the shvua, but the kfira is bebezdin. Kofru shneien ka'achas chayavin. Frek the more very simple question. How could you both talk at the same time? Rashi brings the case of chayros, where an animal had taka two males come out at the same time. Rabbi Yosef Lili over there says you should give it to the kohen because possible the mother gave birth together. They both came out at the exact same time. Chacham argues it's not possible. Therefore, it's both a suffix. So here we're trying to say, Rabbi Yosef Lili, and there Rabbi Yechon says, no, and the Chiddush is v'techidei dibur is kedim adami. Let's see. How many words? Either kedei she'elas tamal l'rav, ikadamri kedei she'elas l'rav l'tamid. But the point is 4 words. Someone says, but the point is sham alechem rabbi, sham alechem rabbi. But it's only 3 words. That's it. Adamri. But if you count the words of shvua shein anu yoydin l'chayidus, it's 6 words. Tu v'havik. Amalei. What I mean to say is avada kol echad ve'echad toich dibur shechaveiroi. Reuven starts talking. The second he stops, Shimon picks up and he continues his words. That's considered teichidei dibur. Bezeh achazeh, the halach is a risha chai v'sheni patur. Masnisin, the law ki hai tana, which we're going to see is Rabbi Lazar in a moment. The tanya mashbi'a idechad, the halach is yipatur. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon is mechayiv. Now, even though an eid echad kipshuta, the reason why it should be patur because there's no tvias mammon. So to our Mishnah, the reason is the sheni should be patur because no tvias mammon. However, Rabbi Lazar in such a case argues as yichayiv. So Zaktamar Lema Bahakim Iflgi the Mar Savo should be Chachamim. Hey Dacha Kiasa Staka the Shvua Dal Kasa. Umar Sava, Rabbi Lazar is going to tell us Hey Dacha Kiasa the Maina Kas. Frektimar but Tismar, is this really true? Amabaya Komaidim. We're going to see there's a scenario but each cited that everyone agrees, even though it's one aid, everyone agrees the Ichai. We're going to see that case in a moment. Vakomaidim. There's a scenario, even though it's Be'ed day, even though it's 2 witnesses, cited is still Potter. And then we're going to have also machlokes. Rabbi Lazar and Chachamim be'edei saita, and akol maidim be'ed echad by mamoin the yechayev akol maidim be'ke'ed shekeneg dechaz should al shvur the yechayev. And we're going to go through these cases in a moment. Ela de kula alma eid echad ki yasi l'shvur kasi. So what would be the machlokes? Rabbi Lazar Chachamim v'hacha b'hakim ifluki. Mar Sava, which is Rabbi Lazar, is going to tell us, Davar hagoyim l'mammon k'mammon dami. You're right, maybe my words is not causing money immediately, achim mammon, because I don't have the power of 2 witnesses. However, if my edus causes you not to make a shur, we're going to see, let's say, mitach sheni yachal l'shavim mishalim, such a case, avada chayiv. Umar Sava chachamim hol lav k'mammon dami. So let's see this price, we're going to break it down. Gufa amabaya komaydim be'ed saita, even though it's only one eid yechayiv, komaydim be'ed saita, the yapatu machlekes be'ed saita. So what's the case? Hakol ma'idem eidechem ma'mam hakol ma'idem eid shekeneged the shvua. Hakol zok the hele gemara falas. Hakol ma'idem beid saita. You know what the case is? Shechayiv be'eid hatuma, which means to say is what's the case of eid hatuma on a simple level is we all know regarding the saita. The saita has 2 eidim say kinoi, 2 eidim say stira, and the halacha is if 1 eid even comes and says I saw the maisa's nus, the halacha is she does not drink the water and she loses her ksuba. So it's very clear that it's mamay. However, kol sheyesh ba, you would be chayv, even though it's only 1 eid. We have a scenario, even though it's 2 eidim, be'ed site the shapat. You know what the case is. Be'edei kinoi. 2 eidim started the kino, which eventually made a ripple effect as she lost the ksuba. The havik goyrim the moment, because the nice still need the eidei stira, and even when the eidei stira, she starts to drink the water, etc. She might be might on her own, etc., etc. Therefore, it's only goyrim the goyrim. One lamed beis and beis. Machlekes is be'edei saita. What would be the machlekes of Elazar Chachamim? Be'edei saita. Be'edei stira. When you only have eidei stira, then what's the halacha? Rabbi Elazar is going to tell us mar savda b'goyim l'mamon k'mamadami. V'chayev, therefore Yechayev. However, Chacham are going to argue. Umar Sava, Lav Kemam and Dami, and therefore you're pot. Hakol Maidim, what's the case? We can act the Chashal Shul. Hakol Maidim, Be'idechad. What's the case? The Eidechad, that you can be Chayev, money, even though you only want aid. The case of the famous case there, Abba. Hakol Maidim, Zaktamar, first case that we're going through is Hakol Maidim, Kshenag the Chashal Shul. The Choshen man, who's the Choshen? Manavshach. We all know that Allah says when a person's Chashal Shvuah, you don't make the Shvuah, rather we all know regular Shvuah is your Nishba v'niftar. However, if you're a Choshen, you're a Gazlin, I make a Shvuah v'metaltal. That's the Chiddush. V'shekeneg the Chashal Shvuah. So Frekdema, what's the case? Who's the Choshen over here? The Choshen loive. You're going to tell me the loive usually makes a Shvuah eid echad, and then for he's usually potter. Damle malve I asis asadisli. If you would have gave your eidus, what's happening over here? The person over here doesn't want to give his eidus, and because he's not giving his eidus, I lost out by pushing you on a Shvuah. Have a mishtabana v'shakilna. Since the halacha is, I'm Ruvain, I'm money Shimon for money, but Shimon's a Gazlan. I want to schlep Levi to give an Eidus that he borrowed money, and Shimon cannot give an Eidus because he's a guy. He's not going to give a shur because he's a Gazlan. Rather, I'll give the shur. On that, he can answer back, V'lei melei. Don't make me chayim money. Me yemer the mishtafas. Maybe you want to make a shur. Ella, rather the case is kegoin tishnei chashudin. You Reuven are a chashud and Shimon is a chashud. Amar mar chaz v'shur l'mechuyev lo. Therefore, mitach shein yachol l'shava. The halacha is mishal. What would be the cases of Beidechad that Yechayev der Baba the Hugav the Chot and Aska Mechavrei? It's a very, very famous Gemara, the Baba Salam and Gimel. Also, Kamei der Abba Miyav Yasser Rabba Kamei. Rabba came in front. They went the Maisa. What was the halacha? Azal Aisi Chatzad the Michta Chot Minei. And he was able to produce one witness that Itaka stole the bar of silver. Amalei in Chatvi. However, this is where he made the mistake by being Maida. He said in Chatvi, Bididi Chatvi. So Amr Abami, what can I do now? Hey, how could we paskin? Lishalem, Lamaisa is no to aid him, saying that he grabbed it. Like a Tresadi. And therefore, liftere, what do you want to say? He's potter with what? With the migu of inchat di chatvi. Haikachatsada. The mechtaf chataf. You want to make a shul because there's one aid? That can either happen. Lishtava kiva the amen chatvi di chatvi, have like a gazlin. So Amr Ababa, V'lemchuy Yeshua, V'enei chol Yeshava, V'lemchuy Yeshua, V'enei chol Yeshava, the halach is mishala. Amr Papa. Hakol Maidim, the Eid Misa. Now this is talking about a simple halacha that a Isha, she doesn't know what's the story with her husband. However, there's a halacha that Eid Echad is enough that if she goes in front of Bezdin with Eid Echad, she can remarry. And one Eid, and there's an Eid that knows her husband died. However, he doesn't want to give the Eidus. Hakol Maidim, the Eid Misa Shu Chayev, because right now she can't get remarried. More than that, she can't get a ksuba, she can't get anything. Hakol Maidim, Eid Misa Shu Pot. And however, there's another scenario where he's legamri potter. What's the case where he's potter? The amala. The halach is he tells her quietly, you should know that your husband died. However, he's still potter. The reason is as follows: the Tanan ha'isha shamer meis baili. Since she knows the Eidah, she could go in front of the Bezdin and say her husband died. The halach is tinase and meis baili tisyabe. Hakol maidim bein misa shuchayev. However, where's the case where he's chayiv? The loyama, this is quite simple. He doesn't tell anybody. The loyama lididav, loyama lilbezdin, and therefore she doesn't know about the eidos, so she can't go to anywhere. She's not going to get a ksuba. Shmami no zok the Gemara's medayik from here. The mashbia eidik karka yechayiv, because the Hamin were thinking, where are you getting a ksuba from? You're getting it from karka. And the Papa is going to say, no, Dilma, the Tfisa Metaltali. The scenario over here is the Isha is holding on to Metaltalim, and that's the case where she would get her ksuba from Metaltalim. Therefore, there's no raya of Mashbei the Karka if you chayiv or not. Kafar Hechad V'Hoidechad V'Chulei. Our Mishnah tells us that the halacha is that you are the person who's kafar yechayiv, etc. So the Mar Hashtav B'Zechazet the Tervaika Kafri, and we still said Amarta Risha Chayiv. However, Vasheni Potter. Kafar echad, vayda echad. Isn't it pashut mivay? My answer is leitzrich. You know what the case is? Gegon she kafar shnein. They were both kafar. V'chaz echad mehen v'hoyde betoich kedei dibur. V'kamashmol and the chiddush is the toich kedei dibur kedibur dami. So Zaktum Mar Bishmar Chesda Mukila Lahukar Rabbi Yosef Glili, like we said earlier, Rabbi Yosef Glili Reishav Shalit Samtzim. We all know Rabbi Yosef Glili is mechadish and it's possibly mitzamtzim. The sefer, that's the chiddush of the Reisha. The sefer it's lashminon. The toich kedei dibur kedibur dami. Ela Rabbi Yechanan, Reisha Tekadei Dibur, V'Sefer Tekadei Dibur, Tarti Lamali. Why didn't the Reisha Sefer tell us the same halachas? And the more answer is Mao the Teimani Mila Kfira Kfira. Ava Kfira V'Haida, maybe not Teimiloi, and that we're saying Kamash Malon even by Kfira V'Haida. Hayush tekita edim. We said kafar rishayna v'ach kafar ashniya. The halachas they both chayiv. So Zok tomorrow, we understand bishma shniya. Oh, this chayiv the kafar rishayna. Lamaisi denied it, and therefore the second edim still had the opportunity to be mechayiv money. Ela rishayna ma'ya kaima shniya. Why is the first person, the first group of edim, have anything to lose? There's the second group that will cause issues. They're the ones who are going to say edus. Amir Avino on the top, Lamed Gimel and Aleph. Kegahacham Aiskinon, very fascinating case. We're going to see this again also on Lamed and base. Kegain Shaisa Shnia B'Shas Kfiras Rishayna. There was Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehudis. There's two groups of Edim. But the second group of Edim couldn't give Edus at that time. The reason is because they were Kroivim in saying they married sisters. And the halach is, you consider Kroivim. V'nashesayin, so what's the Gemara's Masber Bait? V'nashesayin, Geisesites. Ravina's Masber, it even goes deeper. The ladies were dying. And therefore it's considered like they're not krivim. Kamash Malon, Lamaisa was saying, Hashtamia loy shachif. Right now they're not dead, therefore they're considered krivim. It's a little interesting that the Lashon Lamazayim base says, Lamaisa Hashtamias Chaininu veloy shchivi. It's a little different of a Lashonis, but the point is, it's quite similar. It's the exact same concept that Ravina is trying to say. Zok the Heilige Mishnah Mashmiane Aleichem. A person walks over to Shimon. Reuven walks over to Shimon and says, I want you to give Edus. That he has what? Levi has by me, Pikadon, V'Sisumas Yad, it's a dover. What is Sisumas Yad? Simple level means Halva. Shesham b'yad Mammon, Zok Rashi. V'Gezel v'Aveda. So the halacha is, and he says, Shevuos she'ein yadlecha Edus. He just says plain, in Chayuv and Lachas. However, it says, Shevuos she'ein yadlecha she'eshcha b'yad, and he's masber extensively. B'yad plaini pikadon, v'sumas yad, v'gezel aveda, then Chayuv and Kalachas, and Achas yichav and all four. Mashbi ani aleichem lo'isavu v'sedu, she'esh b'yad plaini, he says pikadon. However, he says it's chitin, sorim, nechusman. The point is says wheat, barley, and spelt. Shevuos she'ein yadlecha edus says the plain in Chayuv and Lachas. But if he answers Shevuos she'ein yadlecha edus, she'eshcha b'yad plaini, chitin v'sorim nechusman, Chayuv and Kalachas v'achas. Mashbi ani aleichem, im lo'isavu v'sedu, she'esh b'yad plaini, nezek. The chetzi nezek, we're going to see in this, tzray rice, etc. Tashlum kefel, v'tashlum avachamisha, v'sha'anas, ish ploini is biti, upita is biti, was ma'anis. All these halachas, the yichai money, v'shekani b'ni, Rashi's masber, rather we're talking about kashem b'chabura, otherwise you'd have a problem, a misa. But over here we're talking about the moment of baishas. V'shechava bi b'chaveri. V'shehidlik is kedishai, dafka b'yam kippur, we're going to see dafka, lafuke. Shabbos, with Misa over here, it's Karsti Chayv Mammon, Hare Elu Chayav. Zok the Heilige Gemara Boila Mashbiya the Knas Ma. What is the halacha regarding in the Knas? Is that a little different? So I'll leave there. The Amar even by Knas Yavoy Edim Eidu. So it's Pasha the Chayiv. Since it says the Edim can come and give testimony. Kita Boilach leave the Rabbanon. The Amri the halacha is Moide Beknas. V'Achach Bo Edim the halacha is Potter. So Rabbanon the Hasik Man Sivilu. Elam Kerelazar B'Shem the Hacha Hakamar Dava Gomel Mammon Kamam Dami. That's what we learned earlier in the base. Ela karabon the hachad amar davar hagar the mamalav kamam dami. My kiven the ilam maida miftar lab mamanika kafar. Do we say this is the shayla? Do we say kiven the ilam maida miftar lamaisa fi be maida lab mamanika kafar leidam lamaisa hash to be a law yaidi. So let's bring a right tosh mamash bi'anei aleichem from our mishnah. Him leisavayu v'seidini sheish v'ya pliny nezek v'chatzi nezek v'char kapshuta v'chatzi nezek nasu. And that the more answers command amar palgo niskam and maina. It's a big machlekes in babakama. Ayin Chom, how do we look at Chetzi Nezik? Do we say that be'etzem you should watch your animals? However, the Torah tells us, we're going to have Rechmanas on you since it's not Shchiach, therefore you only chayiv Chetzi Nezik. So that's the halacha moment. The be'etzem you chayiv completely. Or the halacha of Knas is the be'etzem you should be pater legamrei, but you should have watched over your animals because it happens once in a while. Therefore, you chayiv mitam Knas. And some machlekes over there. Zok Demar, Palgo Niska b'mayna nichlamandam Palgo Niska b'mayna l'mandam Knasamay kalameimar. My answer is, what are we talking about? Chetzi Nezek, tzroy rice, which is the halacha of Babakama, we learned it, as the halacha of regel, because it's shchiach, and therefore, the halacha such halacha mashemesina gmir law, demamaynu. Again, the Gemara is going to try to bring another eye. Toshma, tashlume kefil, we all know, kefil is a knas. My answer is no, what we're talking about is the karna, mishum karna. We're not talking about the knas part. V'tashum adava hey, Gemara gives a very similar teretz, mishum karna. Sha'anas is pliny. Sha'anas is pliny. Repeat this beat again. This knas involved. My answer is no. Mishum baishas of gam, which is considered mammon. So Dr. Mar, my kamash malon, kulam amaynu. Just say one or two. Why is the Mishnah being so extensive? And then my answer is reish chada kamash malon and save chada kamash malon. Reisha, first of all, is coming to tell us Chada Kamashmal on the Chetz and Ezek that we learned. Svaroi says Mamaynuhu, and now that we mentioned, we throw in Dav Hein, etc. And Sefer Chada Kamashmal on V'Shehidlik is Kadishi Dafka B'Yom Kippur, which is Kares, which Yechai Mam and Lafuke Mai Lafukim the Nechunim and Akana the Tanim and Nechunim and Akana Aimer. What would he hold? Haya Aisi Yom Kippurim Kashabbos at the Shlumim. Ma Shabbos v'chule. We all know that Shabbos the halacha is Kimle B'Deramin and Inachayiv Huadei and Yom Kippurim. And that we're saying our Mishnah not like that. Toshma. Let's bring a rhyme. Mashbi'ani Aleichem Im Loisa Avoyu V'Seuduni. Sha'aitzi Ish Pliny Shem Ra Albiti. And the halacha is Yechayavin Hagam. It's a knas. Hoydin Piatz Bepotter. More answers. Hamani Relazer Shemini Da'amar Yavoyu Eidim V'Yidu. Like we said earlier, that can be. You have Rabbanan and Rabbi Lezer, pick your choice. And my answer is no. You know what the case is. And that we're saying not that Eidim came after the Adah, rather it's Adah below Eidim. Okay, we're on the Mishnah, Lamed Gimel and Beis, top of the Amud. That what? This has nothing to do with money. That's the whole point. Shani Koyin. I'm a Koyin. You have to know maybe it's not money, but there is to a certain degree money, but it's not Kfir's moment, and maybe for Truma, etc. Shani Levi. Shani Ben Gerusha. Not a Ben Gerusha, any Mechalutza. Sheish Pliny Koyin. Or even somebody else. Sheish Pliny Levi. She'enoi Ben Gerusha. Or She'enoi Ben Chalutza. Or Sha'anas. It's Pliny as Bitoi. Or Pita is Bitoi. V'shechava bi. Banai, over there in such a case where we talk about Chabura, V'shechava b'chaveira, Shehidlik, Kedisha b'Shabbos, which we all know, all these cases have a halacha of Kimlei, Bed, the Ramine, the halacha is Arela Pturin, Mikarbon. Zok Tehele Gemara, time there's plenty kain, and there's plenty Levi. Ha Mane, Yimadaik, Ha Mane le plenty be a plenty, you'll be Chayavin. Haktani Seifa, At Shiyishmum Piateveya. We're going to see in Lamed Hey. You have to hear clearly from the Teveya. Amishmo, Beba, Barsha. Arsha on a typical and simple level. Make it simple, we call it power of attorney. Which is basically the Lashon for Arsha. Amataltli. My answer is when we don't do an Amataltli, Hanim Yelech the Kafre. However, I like Kafre, which is over here, Kasvina. Okay, now we're going to see 4 different Gersos. Exactly how to teach if we're talking about Dafka, Tfilas, money or not. We're going to see Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Yisek Lilu, and Rabbi Shimon. Tana Rabban, Minayin Shein Akosim Medaber. How do we know this whole halacha? We keep on saying over and over that you have to have Kfiras a moment. So how do we know this Ela B'Tfilas moment? First, the halacha is who is Rabbi Lazar's Gerser. Rabbi Lazar Ayman Nemakan Oyin. Now, if we're going to constantly see that it says Oyin twice in the pasuk, it says, for example, Oy Ra'a, Oy Yada. It says over here, Nema kan oyen. By oy ra'a, that's one. Oy, the second one. Nema lahalon. By pikadon. Over there actually says even 3. It says oyen. It says oy b'sumas yad. Oy b'gazel. Oy oshek as imiseyo. Ma lahalon, just like pikadon in medabal tviyas moment. So to by edus afkan in medabal tviyas moment. Frak the mara oyen. By the reitzeach. It says v'im b'sena oy hishlach olav. Oy be'eva yiko. The reitzeach achichu shehein oyen. It still says 2 oyen in medabal shalom tviyas moment. Our answer is done in Ayin Sheishiman Shvuah, which is by Pikadin and Eidos, Ayin Sheishiman Shvuah, Ayachichu Ayin the Ritzeach Sheiniman Shvuah. Frak the Gemara by Saita it says Ay Ava Alav Ruch Kina, Ay Isha Shetaver, Alav Ruch Kina. Ayin the Saita Yachichu Shein Ayin Veshiman Shvuah, Madam Shalai B'Tvias Maman. And our answer is no, there by the Saita there's a Kain involved. Done in Ayin Sheishiman Shvuah, Ve'eniman Kain, which is by Pikadin and Eidos, Ayin Sheishiman Shvuah, Ve'eniman Kain, Ayachichu Ayin the Ritzeach. First of all, Sheiniman Shvuah, Ayachichu Ayin the Saita, Shapi Sheishiman Shvuah, Yeshiman Kain. Again, this is the first Gersa, which is Shitas Reb Eliezer. Which we're going to go back to this. Now we have Rabbi Kiva Aimer. Says in the pasuk, "V'haya ki yeshem la'achas me'ela," to tell us dafka me'ela yish me'ela shul chayiv yish me'ela shul potter. Haketzad. Where do we go on to this? Ketzad tavay maman yechayiv dava. However, you'll be potter. Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to see the Gemara is going to be masber. Rabbi Kiva really holds like Rabbi Eliezer ayin, but he takes it a step further from the me'ela. Rabbi Yisek Lili, we're on the third Aimer. Reyu Aimer v'hu aid. Says in the pasuk, Oy ra'a, Oy yada. That what b'ri'iyah b'lo yediyah, for a person he knows, he saw it, but he doesn't know for a fact. Or yediyah b'lo yediyah kosam adaber. However, what's the case of the Mariya b'lo yediyah? What's the case you can see but you don't know? Ketzat manem and nisilchap mifnei pliny, and he says yavoy pliny v'idu zui riya b'lo yediyah. He knows, but he doesn't know 100% what's going on exactly. And Yediyah B'Lai Ketzat, Mana Haidisif. So he knows he was Maida, but he doesn't know what. Haidisili B'Pnei Pleni. Yavayu Pleni Vidus. Yediyah B'Lai Riyah. Lamaisa, it's a scenario where Avadi was Maida, so he knows about it, but he didn't see it. Then we're on the fourth. Reb Shimon Aimer Chiyev Kan by the Eidus V'Chiyev B'Pikadon. Mala Halon, just like B'Pikadon, Eina Medaber Ella B'Tfias Mamoin. Avkan Eina Medaber B'Tfias Mamoin. Ma'afkan Eina Medaber B'Tfias Mamoin. V'Oid. Then we also have the Kavachayim B'Pikadon Shas Ben Nashim Kan Nashim and Krayvim Kirachaykim Psulim Kasherim V'Chayv Kol Achas, whether it's B'Fnei Bezdin V'Shaloi B'Fnei Bezdin Einoi Medaber Ella B'Tfias Mamoin. We're on the Medal and Aleph. So to Eidos Shaloi Asav Nashim Kan Nashim and Krayvim Kirachaykim Psulim Kasherim Ve'Eina Chayv Achas B'Fnei Bezdin Ein Adin should be Pasha Shaloi Medaber L'Tfias Mamoin. On that, for Ektimara Ma'ala Pikadon Shekain Loi Asabai Mushba Kinishba. This is Reb Shimon's problem. How can you compare Pikadon? That we don't say the halachas of Mushba Kinishba, Mezid, Bish Kishoigit. When I see these two halachas extensively, Taima Be'edos, Shekain Asabai Mushba Kinishba, we said it's mamish considered like you made the Shvuah. Mezid, which is the fascinating Chiddush, the Chayiv carbon even by a Mezid Kishoigit. Tamalaymar, and then he said we have Gzer Shava, Sechta, Gzer Shava, Nemakan Sechta, V'Nema La'alon, Sechta to tell us Mala'alon, Ein Medaber L'Tfias Mamoin, Afkan, Ein Medaber Ella B'Tfias Mamoin. Okay, so these are the halachas, these are the four gerses, which are quite extensive to keep track of the. Basically, it's very hard to do in Daf Yomi because in Lamed Gimel Beis we stop, and then Lamed Dal we try to continue. But over here we're going through it one long time. It's very easy to understand that there's four different mekayres, exactly why we should say the halachas of the pasuk's talking about dafka to be as mammon. We saw Rabbi Lazar from the Ayin. We saw Rabbi Kiva says La'achas me'ela. Then we saw Rabbi Yosef Glili from Hu Eidai Ra Yada. And then we had Reb Shimon that had a problem with the Kavachaymer from the two issues, and he came on to Gzer Shava. Now we're going back to Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar said the Ayin. It says a few times Ayin. We had a choice who to pick it out from. Lamaisa, we wanted to say Meimi Saita. Saita is a Kayin. Reitzeach is not talking about Shevuos. That's what we just went through. So it's affecting more as follows. Maskiv lo Rabbi Ravula. What are you going to tell me? We walked away with the Ayin, but I have another Ayin. Oi, bibitoi. It says, Oy nefesh, ki sishava, oy lahetiv. Yechichu shein ayin. First, there was two ayin in the Pesukim. Ve'yeh shiman shvu, ve'eni man kayin. So you don't have the problem of a saita. Ve'afo pikeinu medaber shaloi b'tvias mammon. We're not talking about mammon over there, but shuas bitoi. So why over there, l'chayr is not mechiach otherwise. And that the more answers you're right, but mistabra mi b'kadon havelei l'melach. L'maisi, you should have learned from b'kadon. Why? Shekain, l'maisi, we have the Gzer Shava. They both say, sechta, misechta. Frak the Mara Adarabba, Mibita Avlamelaf, Yosef over there, Shekain, by Eidus Ibita says Chatos, by the Halachas Ichai Chatos, by Shevuos, we all know, Shevuos Sepekad, when Ichai an Asham. So why do you say that? Shekain Chatos Mechatos. Allah Zak the Hela Gemara Mistabra Havlamelaf. First of all, why? We're going to see. Shekain, we're going to go through this. Shekain Chait. Number one is, they both have Sechta Misechta. B'mezit. The halach is they're both chayiv l'mezid a carbon, which is a fascinating chiddush. By bito, you're not chayiv a carbon because it says vanilla. Then you have the concept of tavrei the kafrei. The they're both going back with the tain and the kvira. Shua's bito just blurting out of shvua. The avrei, they're both going on the past. Mashenki bito we even saw some machlekes, so we can even do a shavar. But bito is all about the future. On that for tomorrow, adarab. Okay, I got it. So you have three nekudas. You have four nekudas. You have chait, meidzit, tavik, avra, avra, adarab, and bito have the melaf. Why? Shekain. First of all, we have the concept. We just said you chayv the what? The chatos. That you both chayv the chatos of oil of yorit. Chatos. First of all, you chayv the chatos. And shiyarda, they both chayv a carbon oil of yorit. Then you also have the concept you both chayiv l'choimish. More answer shkoich. You have 4 against 3. Hanach nefishon. Therefore, it's mistabro to learn it from Pikad. Rebbe Kiva Oimer. The second one is Rebbe Kiva. It says v'aya ki yeshem la'echas meil. Rebbe Kiva Oimer v'aya ki yeshem la'echas meil. Shmeil shu chayiv, shmeil shu pata. Keitz dav m'chayiv tov v'dav acher pata. Frektamar. Okay, I got it. You're learning from Ma'achas to tell us one of his pata. Frektamar. Very simple question. Eipachana. Why are you coming to tell us Eina Medaber L'Tfias Mammon Dafka? Maybe I'll tell you Punk Fakert. Avada the Ayin is what? I agree it's coming to be B'mayit. But maybe it's only coming to be B'mayit. That's good Tfias Mammon. Not to say we're talking about Tfias Mammon. Rather, we're excluding Tfias Mammon. My answer is Rebbe Kiva, Ayin the Rebbe Lezer Samach. The Hainu, Rebbe Kiva is working with Rebbe Lezer. Rebbe Lezer is learning the Ayin. On that, Rebbe Kiva says, I agree to you with the Ayin. However, I'm going to step weiter, even in the Ayin. Even in the Tfias Mammon, I'm going to tell you that what? There's even a step further. My ben Rebbe Lezer ben Rekiva. Mark explains. Ike benayu mashbia ede karka. According to Rabbi Elazar, chayavin. How do you have a case of tviras mammon? According to Rabbi Elazar, for example, the halach is by karka you're chayiv. However, Rabbi Kiva, you'll tell us you're potter. Rabbi Kiva, you're pturin. Rabbi Yochanan, the Amar Hasa mashbia ede karka. I feel Rabbi Elazar, you're pturin. Hacha ma'ika ben Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Kiva. My answer is you do have a case. Ike benayu, can you shut that off? Ike benayu, we do have a case. Ike benayu ede knas. Thank you. We have the case of knas. They realize you're going to be chayiv, and same thing. What we're trying to schlep to by Shevuos ha'apikot. Rabbi Yossi Galili Omer says in the pasuk. This is the third. Rabbi Yossi Galili Omer. It says, "V'hu eidai ra yadav eidis amaskeyamas b'riya b'lo b'diya b'diya b'lo riya kosem daber." Amalei papa labai. Leimer Rabbi Yossi Galili. Leslie derbacha. We spoke about this Ravacha once. We call it circumstantial evidence. If it talks like a dog, walks like a dog, acts like a dog, it probably is a duck. However, do you need to see it 100%? The Tanya Ravacha Omer Gomel Oicher ben Agmalim. While it's mating, the Nakuda is it kills the animals next to it, and on you see a dead gomel right next to it. Benimtza gomel harg b'tzidai. But you do it. It's obvious she's a hargoy. The Isla derbacha b'din. And so this is the raya. That can be the Rabbi Yossi Galili has a bacha. The Isla derbacha b'din in the fashis namashkachis will have a case. For the case of Kerb Shimon Meshetach, we saw this Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Tanya of Shimon Meshetach. Era ben Echama doesn't mean era ben Echama. Vada means era loy era ben Echama zakti l'kutei Rashi. It just so he doesn't want to use a klala. He says era ben Echama im loy reisi echad chiratz echad chaver l'churvoi. What happened was the person was chasing Reuven was chasing Shimon into a churva, empty building. He pulls up a second later. The guy is basically dead. He has a knife in his hand. We say he killed him. He sees the sword in the hand. While blood's dripping. He's fluttering. He's twitching. It's either me or you. So what can we do? Shein damcha masa biyadi sharei amr toya pishnayim edem al shloish edem yumas hameis. Ela makim yifrim cha and amr lo izazim hashamat shenach shchoi nachu shemeis. So what do we see from clearly from according to Rabbi Yossi Galili? If he holds circumstantial evidence, you don't need to see it. If so, for example, by the Ritzich in this case, you know for 100% that the guy killed him. Lamaisa says al pishnayim edem. And that the more answer is no. Filotema isla dervacha, because we could say as follows. Rabbi Yosef Ad agrees dervacha. Bishmi di b'lei riya mashkachaslo. Elariya b'lei diya. What's the case? Do you see it, but you don't know about it? Hecha mashkachaslo. Miloi bay meida. If a person kills, Reuven kills someone, he knows there's a victim, but he has to know. If it's not going to get killed, Yisrael harag. Imadim treif harag or shalom harag. And that's like the Marsh Mamina, because every basically Mashmiya Diknas Potter. These are the Chayiv. Nehi, the Yidi b'lei riya shkachan la riya b'lei dimil bay. Again, you have the same concept. You have to know, Meidaf, Nachris Baal, or Basisrael Baal, or Basula Baal, or Bula Baal. Yosef Rav Amnuna came in the view that Yosef Yehuda Kamvaili had a shayla as follows. Monem Anisich Pliny. A person saying there was Alva, in front of Pliny. Ve'edim right Yosef b'chutz. Now, Taisus throws in, Shema Yibifnim, Hayyaidim, they would know if it was a Piroin Alva, when Lamadal on the base, top of the Amid. However, Rashi wants to say since they're inside, he does like hikr behem nitva. So whether it's like Rashi or like Taisus, what is the halacha? Mai Amalei Rav Amnuna v'aloi matoyin. Rav Amnuna answers back, I don't understand your question. Manavshach. If the guy's going to say, I never gave anybody money, he's hochse kafir. Because Adam see that he gave him money. Maybe they don't know why. And in shakli v'didi shakli, he says, yes, I gave b'shkoich. It wasn't alva. And again, they're outside. They don't know why. What's the help? So what is your shayla? And that he was very impressed. Amalei Hamnuna. I'm so impressed with you. So you could come into the Bais Medrash because you're helping your Rebbeim learn. I borrowed money from you in this corner. Nice, I was never there. Also, I see the used the restroom over there. You're lying. You tell me you were never there. We have Adam. I don't care why you were there. You're lying. He's saying I wasn't there b'chlal, and he's answering you were there for lahashtin. So what do we see from there? What are you saying? Yeah, but he's saying I wasn't there b'chlal. Loyavarti b'tzadam hazeh, and then we're saying loyavarti. I never passed that place. The mice they bring in Eden, they do is hishnemayim b'tzadam hazeh. Amar l'shlakish huchsel kafrin. Maskul of Kahan Rav Nachman. This is what the Gemara's answer is. Hi Dina Persos, the din of the Persians. Mi kama ma'ilam. He never said ma'ilam. He just said I wasn't there. Be'es exek Carmel. He's answering back. I wasn't there at the time that you're discussing. Underline this word. No. Why not? Lamaisa, there's Adam. The simple level means your brain only processes stuff to remember stuff when something significant happens. You don't really remember if you were driving down the road and something was passing by. The brain doesn't work like a dafka when it's alvo. When there's a maisa, your brain wouldn't remember it. And that we saw Reb Shimon. And he said, just like Pipikadin is not talking about Tvias Moment, so the Be'edim is not talking about Tvias Moment, then he tried making a Kavachaymer. That Pipikadin should lie b'fnei Bezdin, Eidos should be a Kol Shekain. However, he had a problem, Mushba, Kanishba, Meza, Kashayig, and then he came on to the Gzeira Shava. That was Reb Shimon. Lamaisa, Macholav Marava, someone said Rabbi Yitzchak Chanina. The point is in Eretz Yisrael, they were making fun of this. They're saying you're not adding up. So the Gemara is going to question, we're basically going to try to figure out what was something that's not adding up, Lefi Shita Reb Shimon. Ma'echukah. And that's like the Gemara. Diktani Ma'ala Pekadin. What was Reb Shimon's time? Ma'ala Pekadin Shein Kain Lo Yasa by Mushba Kanishba. He had two issues. One is Mushba Kanishba and Mezik Kashagi. Frak the Gemara Mechti. This is what's funny. Mushba mi piatzmoi be'edav Shimon le. Where does he know this? The Gam Pekadin. So if so, Pekadin Ash Nami Mushba Piachem Nigma Meidus. So tomorrow, my Chukah. What's so funny? Dil Reb Shimon Kavachayim Ma'isla. He's learning from Kavachayim. Mi Piachem Chayev. Mi Piatzmoi Kol Shekin. Ella, rather than Echanam. It's not on the Mushba and Mishba. Rather, the Chukah is on the Mezik Kashogig in the second part. Diktani, he says, Mal, the Pekadish Kain lost by Mushba Kanishba, Mezik Kashogig. Now, Mechti. Let's see. Mezik, Gabeidis Minole, how do you know Bechlali Chayiv carbon? So, since it says the like Sibin Elam. So, to by Echanam, but Pekadin like Sibin Elam. Amlu Ravuna, my Chukah, the Mamezid, the Lav, Kashogig, Pekadin, Mimeila, Reb Shimon Gamala. He's learning it out from Mila. And that Gemara throws in the Hainu Chukah. At the Gamala Mila, instead of learning from Mila, Nigmal Meidus. And then the Gemara answers, no. Mistabra, if you have a choice, learn out from Meidus Mila, Mila, have the Melaf. Why? Shekain Meila, Mila. Ad the Rabba, Frak the Gemara, Meidus, have the Melaf. Shekain, like we learned earlier, Sachtim, Sachtim, Grev, Gzer, Shaval. Gemara answers, Mistabra, Mila, have the Melaf. Again, first of all, we have the concept of Shekain, we have the concept of Meila. And we have the concept. They both say Me'ilah. They're both Nahagim Bakol. Lafuka Eidos, we all know it. For example, Nashim Psulim, Rechaikim is not going to work. Nana, you have enough from it. They both have enough. Either was Hekdesh. Lafuka Eidos, there's not enough. You're both Chayiv a Kavua. You're both Chayiv a Carbon Kavua. However, Shuas Eidos, we know you're Chayiv a Carbon of Yared. You're Chayiv a Chaimish. We went through this. You're Chayiv a Chaimish. V'Asham Eidos. But Shenkin Eidos does not have a Chaimish. You also Chayiv the Asham. First of all, they both say chet, they both say sechta, and we're talking about hadjit, lafuke, mi'ilah, which is hagdish, and b'shvua, they both have shvua, and tav v'kafrei, and we saw already the ayin. They both have ayin. Mashenki Mila does not have ayin. And my answer is yes, you're right, but it's 6 against 5. Hanach nefisha. So the Ma'chuka. Then what was Rabbi Yisrael Chanina? What were they laughing at? Saw and Reb Shimon. Why? Because Mechti Reb Shimon, where's he learning from it? He comes out with the Gzer Shava Gamala. So Lama led the Parch. What was his tiny? What do you mean? He has a Gzer Shava. Tells us don't say otherwise. Maybe when he was talking about Mekameh to take him like Gzer Shava. But Basa to come like Gzer Shava, like Parch. Fact the Rav Bar Itai the Rabbanon Man Tana Shuas Bekadon Lanitan Zdain Lekapar Reb Shimoni Dilma Mezik Shai Geparch the Gamal Mila the Hanch Nefishin Ava Mushba Kinishba Leiparch Visedar Eidos Visigma Loi shall learn from Pikadon what Mezid the Lav Kishaygig and Ma Pikadon Shaygig in Mezid Loi so tough Eidos Shaygig in Mezid Loi Kehalef Tekechad Yalam Pikadon Mila and that our answers Lahachi. On that, the Gemara answers, Lahachi, we're on top of Lamed He'am at Aleph, Lahachi, Kasser Echmona Le'edos, Gabi Shevuos Bita, Gabi Tumas Mikdosh, Vikdosha, the Wat, the Kulon, Taka Nemer Ben Benelam. However, over here, Bekan Loi Nemer Ben Benelam, the Chayiv to tell us Mamish this case, Al Mezik Shaykh. Okay, now we're going to see a Mishnah on Lamed He'am at Aleph. We're going to see 5 different cases where a person's potter. Mashbi'ani Aleichem, the Gemara is quite repetitive. The Gemara almost quotes the entire Mishnah that says Tamalai Masechta, basically till the next Mishnah. So we're going to go on a little quicker pace. Mashbi'ani Aleichem im leisavoy v'seiduni. First case is a person makes a shua, says, I want to make you sure that you don't know neither shamish plaini litin li masayim zus v'loi nasan, and he doesn't give it a real p'tur. Shalmaisa she'ein chayavin ela tvia ein chayavin ela tvias mamoin kepikad. Case number 2. Mashbi'ani aleichem kishetedu li'edus. This is the future. Why? It has to be that it's going on the past. Number 3, guy gets up in Shul. Everybody over here. Until you say, you Reuven, you Shimon, I need you to come to Bezdin tomorrow. 4th case. However, they only know it. Oisha Amar, Lena Nitva Mashbian Elechem, AMP8, Oisha Echem, Karma Apostle. The Allah is again a real Ptur. And the final case is Shilach Biad Avda, Shamal Nitva Mashbian Elechem, Shematim Yadim Laid, Shetavai Visedu, a real Ptur, Achi Yishmu, Mipiative. So we have 5 different cases in the Gemara. Zaktamar, the first case, Tana Bana, Mashbian Elechem, like Savu Visedu, Shamish Plain, Intilim, Masim Zuzah, Nasan Yachalu Chayavan, Tamalaiman, that was saying, why would you think? Otherwise, Sechta, Shavan, Namakan, just like it says over here, by the Eidos. Sechta b'nemen la'alon by Pekadon Eidos, Sechta ma la'alon, just like over there, by the Pekadon, b'tvias momen v'yeshlai, so to Afkan by Eidos, b'tvias momen v'yeshlai. Second case, Mashbi'ani aleichem, if you know in the future, k'shetedu l'Eidos v'chuli. Tana Rabbana Mashbi'ani aleichem, k'shetedu l'Eidos, shetavai v'sedun yachalu chayavan. Tamalayma says in the Pasuk, v'shama kol Allah, v'u'ed ayra yada, to tell us that Dafka, he already knows about it. It doesn't help to say, if you're going to hear testimony in a week from now, I want you to come. Third case, even if there's witnesses here. The only havamina to discuss if there's witnesses in the room. My answer is like now the Tame Commander Amaladami, the mice, it's like me talking to you. Who am I looking at when a guy gives a speech and he's giving a musr? He's usually looking at the people to give musr. Tamalaima, the mice, what does it say? Kamashmul and otherwise. Tanamachi, Ra'a, you see a group of people, Shimnei Adam, Indim, Ba'ida, Benan, Ramalam, Shmina, Lechem, and Matem Yadim, Le'eda, Shedvayu, Shetavev, Shedinu, Yachu, Chayav, and Tamalaima, it says, V'hu, you underline that aid, V'harei, the mice, wasn't Miyachadem as Edim, La Yichad Edim. Yachol, you would think to go extreme. Afila Amar Kol Ha'oimdin Kan, and you would think you're part of Tamalayma. No, Lamais in such a case Yechayiv, because it says we wait. V'arei Yichad Eidav, since it's Miyachad Eidim, therefore Yechayiv. The 4th case was Amal Shnei Mishmei Elechem Tarnabanan Amal Shnei Mishmei Elechem Plenty Matem Yadim Le'edus Shetavai V'Sedinu Vein Yadim Le'edus. Lamaiso, they know the Edus. The Allah is Emi Piedo Shemem Ka'echad Ka'erev Apostle Yachu Chayav, and Tamalayma says in the pasuk. If the aid doesn't say this Eidos, to tell us Beruyin Lahagada Kasamadav. Shalach bi'adad v'chule, which is the last and final case. Tana Rabbanan, Shalach bi'adad v'shamal l'manet v'mashbein alechem shematem yadim le'edu shetavav v'sedu yachu yuchayav tamalay. It says in Yagiv v'nasa avonai. Zaktamar ma tamalay my Talmud. What do we see for this? Amar Lazar im lo yagid. If he tells him, Ksiv, the way you read it is, with the Lamed, sometimes we say loy with an aleph. However, over here, what do we have? Lamed, Vav, Aleph. Im lo yagid, Ksiv, im loy. If he tells the Teveya, lo yagid, then v'nasavan. If the Teveya comes over to you and muns you, Dafka, that's when you're not savoina. However, Ma'acher, but not him, the Teveya himself. Rather, he sends somebody else, lo yagid, Allah is your pot. Zok the Heilige Mishnah. Mashbi'ani ani aleichem, or mitzavani aleichem. Whether I adjure you, or I command you, or I bind you, ani alei l'chayav. B'shamayim v'aretz, a person says, by heaven and by earth, alei l'ptur. Ba'alev dalet, which means to say, we're going to discuss a lot of shemas. Aleph dalet means what we see in the Siddur, Aleph dalet nun yud, which is basically a doi, what we say in such a case, b'yud kei, which is a Shem Hashem, or B'yudke, Yudke, Vavke, B'shakai, B'tzvakos, B'chan, V'rachim, all these are names that we say Hashem Hashem. V'achapayim, V'chesed, B'chol HaKinuyin, Harei L'chayavim. HaMakalo, we discussed this a lot in Sanhedrin. B'kulan Chayav, Chayav, Divrei Meir. Chachamim says, no, you have to say Dafka, the Shem HaMiyuchot. Chachamim Paitum. HaMakalo V'imai, B'kulan Chayavim, Divrei Meir, Chachamim Paitum. HaMakal Atzmai, V'chaveir, B'kulan Ayver, B'loisa say. If a person says, Yacha Hashem Elikim, may Hashem strike you, V'chein Yacha Elikim, Zui Yalak Subbatayra. Al yakcha v'yivrecha. If you give Eidos, your bunch should not strike you, or he should bless you v'yivrecha, or v'yetilcha. Or maybe we're going to see is mechayiv mechlal alav t'shmei hein v'chachamim paitu. Zok the heilige gemara mashbi'ani aleichem. My kamar. The Maisa doesn't say Shem Hashem. Amar Yehuda Spitz. This is what he's saying. Mashbi'ani aleichem b'shvuah hamur b'Torah. O mitzavani aleichem mitzavah hamur b'Torah. Sraischem ani isra hamur b'Torah. Amar la'abayo elaha. The Tani Reb Chia in such a case where he says Koiv Lachem, Not kolchem with the base, with the chain. I'm chaining ani. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah chains. Mashbia ani alechem b'shvuah. Mitzav ani alechem b'shvuah. Aisarschem ani b'shvuah. And kavlachem ani avadi says it with the shvuah. B'shvuah. Ba'alef dalet. We spoke about this. Nun yod or the yud kevav ke. B'shaka b'tzvakes b'chanim rachum erech apayim rachas. Zok demar remember the chanim rachum. It's real shemus. You can, for example, erase shemus nunu or minu. Yeh shemus shenim chakim. We all know you're not allowed to erase shemus shem. V'yeh shemus shenim chakim. Elo and shemus shenim chakim. Kegoin kel. Elekecha, elekim, elekechem. Eke, she'eke. The aleph, dal, and the yud kevavke, and shakit tzvakos. Hare elu. This you cannot. Einim chakim. Aval agadol hagiba v'anoyer adi v'chazik v'amas azu chanim v'rachum. This is the point. Shalom l'lain chanim v'rachum. Erech apayim rav chesed. Hare elu chakim. So how can you tell me it's the shame? Alright, you could erase it. Amabai, you know what we're talking about. Mas nisin, what we're saying is, b'shvuah, what are you making? B'mi shuhu chanun. The person of doesn't shame him first. Rather, it's good enough to say the mishu chanun, b'mi shuhu rachum. But avada means to say the Rebbeinu Shalom Kama. Amalei Ravawan Lamanhem Beis Ihachi b'Shemayim v'Aretz Nami. Why don't we say by heaven and by earth? Then the answer we should say b'mi Shemayim v'Aretz Shalom Kama. My answer is Hachi Ashtem Hasam keeping the Lakamid Achrina Dikri Rachum v'Chan and you're discussing the Rebbeinu Shalom. Vada mishu chanun v'Rachum, vada mishu rachum Kama. Hacha, keeping the Gushmayim V'Aretz, you talk a literally mean heaven and earth. B'Shemayim V'Aretz Kama. Tanu Rabbanan Kasav. What is the halacha? We said the aleph lamed melekip. So you underline the aleph lamed or the ka, the yud me Hashem. Harei zeh nimchuk. But however, the yud kevavke from yud kevavke, the first two letters. The shin dalad mishakai or the aleph dalad ma'adai nun yud or tzadi from the tzadi beis from tzvakos, which is tzadik beis. Harei zeh nimchuk. Rabbi Yisrael mitzvaka is kula nimchak. Tzva'is he wants to say shalenik or tzva'is or shem Yisrael shenem like it says in the pasuk. But it says tzva'is says I'm in Yisrael mitzvah sign. I'm a shmuel. I say in Allah. Rabbi Yisrael rather tzvaka is shem Hashem. Tana Abanan. Kol hatofel l'shein v'Ribbanu Shalom ben l'mefona ben l'acharav. I raise a nimchak. L'fon of Ketzah for example. La Hashem. So the lamed is nimchak. Be Hashem. Beis is nimchak. Ve Hashem. Vav is nimchak. Me Hashem. The mem is nimchak. She Hashem, the shin is nimchak. Ha Hashem, very rare to have such a case, is nimchak. It says over there, Misrachikim Ha Hashem, they bring it in Yirmiyah. Ha Hashem nimchak. Ka Hashem, the chaf is nimchak. Lachar of Ketzad, we have a lot. Elekeinu nimchak. Elekechem. Elekechem. The hem is nimchak. Elekechem, the chem. Chaf mem is nimchak. Acharei morim lachar nimchak. Why should Ma'aso shekavakitchu Hashem and Aravuna Allah is kachir. Avram delatayil lenavois. Begive us Binyamin, Shloim and Daniel is the same. We're going to see that all these halachas, we're going to go through quite extensively. All the halachas of Psukim is a Shem Hashem. Is it that Dainai is a master, but not of Adach HaShalom, the Rebbeinu Shalom, Shem Hashem, etc., etc. Kol Shemus Amurim B'Torah, Ba'Avram is Kodesh, Chutz Mizeh Shuchal Shenemar, where it says, by Avram Binu, it says, Vayomer Hashem. Who is he talking to? Is he talking to the Rebbeinu Shalom, therefore Shem Kodesh? Or he's talking to the Malachim? Hashem is my master, no Matzichein Beinechem. Chanina, who is the son Ben Achir B'Shur, Relazim Ben Azar B'Shur, Relazim Adai, who's the brother of B'Shur, Relazim Ben Azariah, they say it's false. Even this, Av said Kodesh, and he's not talking to the Malachim, rather he's talking to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Come on, Azla Hadam Revidim Rav. They like Chnosses Archim Yisam Akbel Shechina. Come on, like this. Chanina Relazim and Isa Zog. They said that Avram Avinu is talking to who? To the Rebbeinu Shalom. Said Rebbeinu Shalom, you gotta wait. I got my Chnosses Archim. Call Shem Hashem Wurm Beloit. Is Chol Chutz Mizeh Shukadesh and Ema Yemeleit Aleim Al No Hashem. Over here means Rebbeinu Shalom. Hinema Matzah Adchal Chein Ben Echel V'Goyim. Mi Sheish B'Yad L'Ham Slach Zeh Kodesh Baruch Hu. Call Shemus Hamurim Ben Navos. We all know the famous Ma'aser with David HaMelech is Kodesh. Ben Micha the Pesel is Chol. Rebbe Elazar Haim Ben Navos is Kodesh. Ben Micha depends Yesh Ben Chol Yesh Ben Kodesh. The Aleph Lamed of Kel Chol. The Yud Kei Vav Kei is Kodesh. Chutz Mizeh Shal Lamed Vu Kodesh Kol Yimai Hema Hayos. Beis Halakim is B'Shila Kalayim Shema Samur is Begivas Binyamin. What's the case of Givas Binyamin with Rebbe Elazar Michal, Rebbe Shua Aymer Kodesh? Now at the simple level, to give a little concept, to give a little context, the Maisa, we all know the fascinating Maisa of the Givas Binyamin, the concubine of Binyamin, that what happened was there were perpetrators in Shevet Binyamin that were nanas, they were ma'anis a girl, they were brutally ma'anis her so badly that she ultimately died from the Maisa. The other Shvatim went over to Shevet Binyamin and said, you better tell us who did it, because we want to kill them. And the Maisa Shevet Binyamin said, we're not going to open our mouths. So they went to Milchama 3 different battles. They had the Pesukim talk about it 3 different times. The first 2 battles, they were not Menatzech. Lamaisa, they got a lot of, it was a very grueling battle. They lost both first 2 battles. They ultimately won the war by the 3rd battle. And we're going to see the Pasuk. The Pasuk Lamaisa says, the 3rd time they asked the Rebbeinu Hashem, it says, Hashem, Alu, the 3rd time, Ki machar etnena biyadecha. Tomorrow you're going to be Menatzech. But the first 2 battles, even though it sounds like that they asked the Rebbeinu Shalom, and they said, go out to war. So Zok Gemara, so depends. Rabbi Lazar wants to say it's Chol. Rabbi Yeshua I'm a Kodesh. I'm a Rabbi Lazar. How could that be that you told me it's Kodesh? The first 2 Machamas they lost. What do you mean? It's the Rebbeinu Shalom Elamai. It wasn't the Rebbeinu Shalom. Then my answer is, I'm a Rabbi Yeshua. No, it was the Rebbeinu Shalom talking about. But Masechet Asa. He just said go out to battle. They're going to win or not. The Rebbeinu Shalom didn't say you're going to win. Like it says in the pasuk, should we go out? What's it say? You should go. By the 3rd machama, they were talking Menatzech. Kol shloimoi ha'amurin b'shir shirim kodesh. Shir lemisha shalom shaloi chutz mizeh. Like it says in the pasuk, Karmi sheli lefanai. The vineyard of who? Of Shlomo Melech. Ha'elef lecha Shlomo, the 1,000 Shlomo. That Shlomo is referring to Shlomo today. But the Masayim, Lenaitim is Peri, is referring to Talmidim, is Rabbanah. The Yeshayim wants someone to say, Avzechol, hini mitasai, shel Shlomo shishim, that he had a lot of nightmares. Avzezak Demar, Veloim, when it says Avzechol, it sounds like Veloim ba'ech. That's Pashut, that the first Pasuk of Karmi is Chol. The Katla, government that kills Chamashisa 1/6 Ba'amo, Loimi Antra Shenem, like it says, Karmi Shili Lefonai, Ha'elev L'choshloim, L'machus D'Rakia, Masayim L'naitim Esperi, L'machus D'Aira. So it's actually not even a 1/6. 200 out of 1,000 is actually 20%. It's more of a 5th. So Zoktamar Shmuel like a Tanakama, like a Yeshayim. The Maran says, Halachi Kama Yeshayim is a Kaidish Taka Karmi Zeuchol D'Mitasa. Shmuel is going like the Yeshayim, the Amar Ki Yeshayim. Kol Machayim but Daniel is called Chutz Mizeh Shu Kaidish. Ant Malka Melech Machaya. This over here, when it says Malka Melech Machaya, is referred to the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Elakah Shemayim Machusa. The Chasna is very strong. The Sakvan is powerful. The Yikaran is honorable. Yavloch. The Yeshayim is someone who says the Kaidish and Amar, like it says. Marei, when it says Marei, it means the Lord, it means the Rebbeinu Shalom. Chama, L'Sanechov, Sharla, Erech. So Zoktamar, Laman Kamar, who's Daniel talking about? Who's Yisrael? That can be Melech Kalai. He's cursing out Kalai Yisrael. Yisrael. Mar's going to answer. Tanakama is going to tell us, no. Avadia Sainim. The Sainim don't have to be Yidden. But Tanakama Salva Sainim Yisrael Ika. Sainim Avdichav Leka. Avadia has Sainim. And therefore, that's what he's referring to the Sainim of Nebuchadnezzar. Ubechal Kinuyan Harei L'Chayavin. We're talking about Aiden that when they make a Shvuah. The halacha is the chayav and chuler. Minu yitin Hashem ha'yischel Allah v'shur matam alayma v'lekvanemar v'yishbi'a kainas isha v'shur Allah. And then the Gemara answers, if you shenem v'shama kol Allah nemakan. It says by the site Allah v'nemar la'lama edus Allah ma'la Allah. Just like when they said this is shua, so to have edus avkan shua. Ma'la la'lama said this is b'shem avkan b'shem. So what do we see very clearly? Yitakani shem, not kinoi. Amabai like kasha. Ha Rabbi that says dafka. Ha Rechanina Rabbi that says the what? Dafka shem. Ha, when it says Kinu is Rabbanon, the Tanya Rechanina Reidi Aimer, Hoy Lavar Mataya Shava, Va'alti Shava, or Kalel, or Va'alti Kalel. My Shava is B'Shem Af, when we say the Loisi Shava is also B'Shem, Akilo is B'Shem Af, Loisi Kal B'Shem. Frekti Mar Rabbanon. So, Ig Mir Gzer Shava, Ani Bai Shem Yuchat. Like Mir Gzer Shava. By the site and Edus, they're not going to make a Shava. Allah the Shua, Himinalu. Moran says Nafkaluma, the Tanya says by Edus says Allah. Ein Allah, Allah Shishua. V'chein Aimer says V'shviya Koinas Isha, B'Shua Allah. Fraktimar Hasam Shevuos Ha Alaksif. My answer is Hachikama. Allah ain't Allah the B'Shua. V'chino Ein Mishbiya Kainas Isha B'Shuas Allah. Uminayin lasses they take out the parentheses. Allah Sheinim Mashua Kala Shishma. Okay, Yeshima Shua. Rather we read it to Minayin One Lam and Vavam and Aleph. Lassos Ushua Sheinima Einima Allah Kishua Sheshima. Allah Tamalayma says V'Shama Kol Allah. V'Shama means Allah. V'shama kol, because of Rashi's masber, it could have just said, take out b'chlal the word Allah. Kasav kol Allah is Yisera. Rather, it's coming to the drasha to tell us he can be chayiv to ma'achim, either with a curse, or v'shama kol without the curse. In such a case, you're both chayiv. Omer avavo minayin la'Allah shishvuah shenamar v'yavai. It says in the pasuk, v'yavai Vayave oisoi be'olah v'goyim. V'chsev v'gam b'melech v'mchanetza marat. So what are we talking about? To give a little context. It's a little missing over here. What is it talking about over here when it says Vayave oisoi be'olah? It's actually Gemara in the Dar. What happened was Tzidkiyahu saw Nebuchadnezzar doing a very disgusting act. What was he doing? It was a shayla, was live or was raw, but he was eating a rabbit. And Lamaisa, Nebuchadnezzar's middle chewing his rabbit. He sees Tzidkiyahu looking at him. See, he's very embarrassed. He pulls over to Tzidkiyahu, he grabs and says, I'm going to make you, you better make a shvuah. You're not going to tell a soul what you saw me doing. I'm doing weird acts. Lamaisa, what did Tzidkiyahu do? He pulls up the Sanhedrin, and he what? He was shayl the nether. Lamaisa, he was shayl the nether, and he snitched. You have to know what he really snitched. But the point was, that's considered a merida. So this is the pasuk. Vayava Isab Ali made a shut to Tzidkiyahu. You better not tell anybody what I did. I ate this live rabbit. Why he was marad? The Lamaisa going to Sanhedrin and telling them what happened. Tana Arur. When it says Arur, has boy nidoi, has a band by klala, by shvua. Boy nidoi, the same type of thing we all know regarding the Mechama, which is Mechamas Barak against Sisra. The Taishim Amneirus, they didn't want to fight. So what are we going to say over here? Well, here the pasuk says Arur. So he cursed him out. Barak Abala cursed him out. It says as follows: Arur Meiros, the Taishim, the people that lived in Meiros for not fighting. Amar Malach Hashem. Who over here? Malach Hashem over here. We're trying to signify means they're up. Who? Barak. That what? Oiroi Arur Yeshveha. And they talk about Mu'ula, when you put a son in a chayim, you do a shayfer. Ba'am Meir Shipuri, Shamte Barak, for the people that lived in Maris, for not going out to the Mechama against Israel. Boy Klala, says a Klala, D'chsev, Eile Yamdu ala Klala, D'chsev, what does it say? Arur, Ha'ish, Asher Yaseh, Pesel, Umasecha, V'goyim. Boy Shevuos, D'chsev, like it says regarding the Shevuos, Yeshua told the men not to rebuild Yerichai. Vayish be Yeshua be'isi lema har asher ish asher lifnei Hashem was going to try to rebuild Yerichai v'gaimer. Fraktamar v'dil matar diavalu. First he made a shvuah and he cursed him out. Ashvinu v'latanayu. Ela mahacha. Rather we're going to bring a different pasuk. The ish Yisrael says in the pasuk. The ish Yisrael nigas b'yaymahu v'yoyel shol soam lemar. What did he tell them? Ar ish asher yachal lechem. This is talking about the Melchama against the Plishtim. He said you shouldn't eat anything before v'gaimer. V'chsev. The Yainason Laishama Beishbia, you understand hear about his father Shua, which is Shul. Havisam. Fraktamar, but Damahachanami Tarti Avalu. Ashbein Uvelanatayu. My answer is Miksev Ve'ar. Doesn't say Ve'ar, it says Ar. So Zakmar, now that you tell me this teretz, we go back earlier. Hashda Asalachi can say Beishua, the same teretz, says Sanami, like say Ve'ar. Rabbi Yosef Bechanina, Amen. When a person says Amen, by Shua, by Kabbalah Stvar, and by Manas Stvar. By Shua, Dechseva, Amra, Aish over here says it twice, Amen, Amen, by Kabbalah Stvar, Dechsev. Arur Ashelayakim Mr. Batar Zais Lasses Isam Amakalam. What do we say? Amen. By Amaras Barm, the Chseva Yami Yirmiyah Novil Hanania. Amen. Kiyas Hashem Yakim Hashem is the Rachel. Rabbi Lazar, Lav is a shvuah, and so too when a person says no, and Hain when a person says yes shvuah. So Zakmar Bishma Lav the Shvuah, the Chseva says the Mamayim Lamabel is talking, we all know, with the what? With the shvuah that Rabban made against the Mabel. You're not going to have a Mabel again. Where do we know that yes is a shua minol? My answer is svarum with the last shua nam hein nami shua. Rav Yehuda Amar lav lav trev zimni Yehuda Amar hein hein trev zimni. Dichsev like it says in the pasuk. V'lo yikares kol basar oid mimei hamabel. Leikares kol basar oid mimei mabel v'lo yeh oid mabel l'shaches haaretz. So it says it clearly in the pasuk. In Zaktamar with the lav, trezimni, hain, so too yes, nami, trezimni. Hamakal b'kulan chai, different meir, however, chachamim say, dafka the shem miyuchad, otherwise you're pait. Tana abana. Ish ishki kal kov, v'nasichat, matem leva loik v'nama. We already learned this in the pasuk. It says, v'noikev, shem Hashem, mois yumas. Yachal yechayev el Hashem yucham b'lat. Minayin, how do we know the rabbi says a kanuin tamalayim? It says, what does it say? Ish ish. Ki kal l'koy v'goyimim kal malkim divrei meir v'chamayim no tafka to tell us Hashem yuchad is b'misa. However, al kinuyin is only bazar. V'makalol ave v'imoy v'chule. Again, we see the machlekes says yichayev. Chacham when I say dafkoi b'shem yuchad. Man chachamim. Rav Nachman Yesi Tanya Rav Nachman Yesi Aimer. It says in the pasuk, end of the pasuk says ben nakvay shame. Then you must matam alayim shame. Liman amakal avimo shein chayvin shekal b'shem. V'kal atzme v'chaveira. We saw what does the Mishnah say? Over Allah v'chule. Everyone agrees that Yechayev alav. Atzmai, person when he curses himself, whenever says, he should beware, or pen lest. Va'alan do not, it says, a person says, Yacha Hashem Elakim, V'chein Yacha Elakim, Zui Alak Subater. Yosef Kahana committed Rav Yehuda, and he was quoting these Mishnayos. Yosef come Amas Niskin to Tanan. Amalei says, no, Kanei, don't say what you're doing. It's like a person says, if a person says, I will kill you, don't say you, say I'll kill you. We saw this in the Mishnayos, by Yaki Yaisi is Yaisi. We had that concept when we wanted to quote the Rebbeinu Shalom Kilu. Over here also he says, don't say you, you're talking to me. Rather say, Kanei, use somebody else's name. Yosef Merabana committed Kanim Yosef Kama, it says also, Gam Kel Yitatzchel and Etzach. And Yachtecha, like it says in the Pasuk, Yachtecha, V'yisachecha, he should tear you up, Ma'oil, V'sherecha, Meretz Chaim Selah. Amalei again, Kanei. So look more tight, why do you need both? One is talking about the Hillim. The Maran says, Malti, Manim Lamasnisa, but Krai, which is talking about the Psukim, Ema, Loim, Chanina, Kamashmon, even by the Psukim, you should use like a third party name, but Abad during Kriyas HaTorah, V'chulei, when we use such clauses, we say it the way it is. It says, Al Yakcha, Oivi, V'recha, V'yentlecha, Remeir, V'chayiv, V'chachami, Paitu. So a person says, if you say Eidos, the Rebbeinu Shalom should bless you. Sounds like, but if I don't say Eidos, I'm going to get cursed. That's the whole concept. You hear from this, but otherwise you will get cursed. Rather, you flip it. The Rameir says, Yepadah Chachamim says Yichai. Because Rav Yitzchak Tanik at the Tanan, Rav Yosef Hashtan Tanan, Tanan Achi, V'chiyatz Rav Yitzchak Tani Achi, Shma Mina Dafka Tanan. Elakasha. My answer is Kila Elakasha. My answer is Kila Esli Dafka Bib. My name would be Surah Isli. Frek the Mare Saita, which is the Surah of Amr Tam Machinoi, Hanaki Ksip to tell us. Even such a case, Time Ksip Hanaki Alav Hachi, you would hear Mechlal Lav. Hato Shemein Loyam Rinan. So how can you tell me this in this whole concept of Loyam Rinan? Ella rather Epoch, you have to flip it. There may attack us his pot. Where it says I feel to be Surah Leslie. Maskul Ravino be Surah Leslie. Is this really true? Lamaato by Shisuyi Yayin Ufiru Yoish Tibim Misach. And I mean the Leslie Mer. But Tanan it says clearly Elush Misa Shisuyi Yayin. The people that drink water for rice, you have to get a kindness to get a haircut every 30 days. Eloilam Taka Tepoch and Kilesle Bimamayno. However, be Surah Isle Vishani Saita. The reason by Saita, let's be real, there's still a ksuba involved. The Surah is Bimamaynu. Hadron Allah Shvuot is Haedos Hadron Allah. Okay, now we're going to say Shvuot Bikadin. Like we said, Rashi says, I did tell him Shvuos Eidos. This whole mission we're going to say is Shvuos Bikadin. Shvuos Bikadin. Nahagas, Ba'anashim, U'Ba'anashim, Merchaikim, Merchayvim, Mechsherim, Psulim, Mifnei Bezdin, Mishalai, Mifnei Bezdin, Mipiatzmu. However, Mipiachem, and Chayiv, very similar. The Eidos, Achikman, Bezdin, Vermeer. Chamiayim, Bein Piatzmu, Bein Piachem, Kim Shukov, Bein Chayiv. Vechayiv, Yechayiv, a carbon of what else then a shkuk, a shvuah. V'ashkagasa Yechayiv Zodan Pekadin. We saw if you don't know what the punishment is. Ve'nechayiv Ashkagasa Geridusa, like you said, you could pass the polygraph test. Umachayiv Els Dain over here. Suddenly, what do you chayiv? You're not chayiv a carbon haliviyai, which can be mamish a few pennies. Rather, Yechayiv Asham Beketzev Shkolim. It's quite a lot of money. 2 silver shkolim. Shuas Bekadin Ketzat. Amalei Tainli Bekdain Yishesh Biyadcha. And he answered back, Shuas Shein L'Chaviyadi Shamalei Hein L'Chaviyadi Mashbiach Aniva Ma'amin Areiz Chayiv. He should be allowed 5 times the same time. Beim Mifnei Bezdin, Beim Shalai Mifnei Bezdin. The Kafar Chayiv Kalachas V'Achas. Over there, suddenly Chayiv in each and every one. Amar Rab Shimon Matam Neishi Yachal Achzal Haydais. So it comes out that it's a kfirus moment. Hey Chamisha Tovim myself 5 different people. Amar Loi Ten Loi Begadah Shein Shalom Miyadecha. And he answered back Shul Shein Lecha Biyadi Nechav Lachas. However, he answered Shul Shein Lecha Biyadi Loi Lecha V'Loi Lecha V'Loi Lecha. He talks to each and every one Chayiv Kalachas V'Achas. Rabbi Lazayim actually until he says the Shua B'Achreina. He says V'Loi Lecha B'Shua. And that the Shua helps for everyone. Rabbi Shimon Ayim actually Shua Lecha V'Achas. Tainli Pikadin, give him the deposit back for some Siyam long Gezel or Raveda Shesh Biyadcha, and he answers back Shul Shein Lecha Biyadi Nechav Lachas. However, he says all of them Shul Shein Lecha Biyadi Pikad. This is some Siyam because of Raveda Chav Kalachas Lachas. Tainli Chit, another case. He says his wheat, his barley is spelled. Tainli Chit v'kus Misayim Shesh Biyadcha, and he answers back Shul Shein Lecha Biyadi Nechav Lachas Lachas. Shul Shein Lecha Biyadi Chitin. He says the Chitim sorry v'kus Mechav Kalachas Lachas. Rameir says Rameir Afilo Amar Chita, which you would have a havmina. Even if he says what? Chita v'sa'ira v'chesemes, the halacha is yechayev al kol achas v'achas. And the chiddush is, don't think he means just one chitin, rather he means the whole entire bundle. A person says anasta or petisa, you seduce his biti v'ormalai anasta v'le petisi. Meshbiach ani v'amam and chayev. Reb Shimon, however, is Paiter Sheina Masham Knas Al Piatzmai. Amar Laf Sheina Masham Knas Al Piatzmai. However, he still has the Pagam. Masham Baish's Pagam Al Piatzmai. Therefore, it's considered a moment. Ganata Shairi. Voim like Ganati. Mashbiach Ani V'Amamin. The Allah is Chayiv. However, he says Ganati V'Loi Tabachti V'Loi Machati. Mashbiach Ani V'Amamin. Yapata, because again, it's Knas. Hey, Miss Sharcha Shairi V'Amalei Miss. Mashbiach Ani V'Amamin. The Allah is Chayiv. Hey, Miss Sharcha Sadi V'Amalei Hey Miss. Mashbiach Ani V'Amamin. The Allah is Chayiv. Voim Mashbiach Ani. The Allah is Mashbiach Ani V'Amamin Chayiv. However, he says Dafka by Shari. Hamish Sharchas Avdi Voim Eloi Hamish Mashbiach Ani V'Amamin Yapata. Amal Chavalta Bi V'Asi B'Chabura. Voim Eloi Chavalti never happened. V'Asi B'Chabura Mashbiach Ani V'Amamin. The Allah is Chayiv. Amaloi Avdoi, which is again is a Knas. He Palta Sheinai V'Siyante Seini Voim Eloi Pata V'Eloi Siyante Mashbiach Ani V'Amamin. The Allah is Pater. Zeh Haklau. Kol Mashal Piatzmai Chayiv. She'ein Mashal Piatzmai. The Allah is Yapata. Rav Acha Bar Huna Rav Shmuel the Rabbi Rav Chana Rav Yitzchak Rav Yehuda Tony, they were learning the Masechet Shevuos Bei Rabba, one the Gemara, Banalam involvement base. Pagavu of Kahana v'Amar, one Lamed Zainam and Aleph, and he asked the following question of Kahana. Hazid b'Shvuos hapikadoin v'Hisur Bei Mau. Over here we're going to have a Shiloh, we all know. Yechayev carbon. So maybe Yechayev, over here you want to say maybe you should get Malkus, and maybe you get both. Maybe you don't, right? We all know very rarely you get two punishments. So maybe the Asha, maybe the Malkus. What is the halach over here? Do we say Kivin the Chiddush of Chalatayra like Ashkon Mezit? You never find the Maisi carbon. Person does something, the person never have a carbon. Sonally over here might be called it. V'hacha Maisi carbon. So therefore, I'll tell you now. It doesn't make a difference. Has to be now. Layasrbe. Oidel Mahani mi lehechel layasrbe. Shkach. That's when you have a carbon. Aval lehechel the asrbe. I'll tell you, Milkalaki, you get Malkus carbon like Maisi. However, you don't bring a carbon. Oidel Mahava. Then maybe you have Malkus and a carbon. Amalei answer back Tanina. What do we say? It says in the price, Chamura heimenu Shevuos hapikad. Why Shevuos hapikad? Much more chamer. Shechayavin al zdoina. What does it say over there? Yechayiv what? Makus. And we're going to see in order to be chayiv makus, elamay yet have edim. Yechayiv makus. Val shekagasa what yechayiv? Osher mekasser shkol. Mid the kamel al zdoina makus, elamay yet asra. How else can I be chayiv makus? Mechlal da'asrbe. And what does it say? The kamer makus in carbon light. So what's the chumrah? What's talking the ma'ila? My chumrah, a person much rather bring a carbon than nichel aleinish the ma'isi carbon like loki. If you have a choice between getting malchus or you get a carbon, a person would rather to bring a carbon. Who's the one who says zadon shvuas because leinita lekapara? Rather a carbon. You don't get a carbon. You don't get a kapar by just bringing a carbon. So Shimon, Rabbanan will tell you carbon ami ma'isi. But we know that bar minahi, don't bring this b'chlal, right? I actually learned it different. This is how I learned it. Nothing to do with Malkus because it's calling. My chumrah, the ilah. What is a chatas by coming out of the yared? Bastanka. It's nothing. It's hardly any money. However, asha because it's calling. Frektamar saying echanami. Look me Why do we learn that from it? My answer is no. Dilma. I'll tell you the case is the layasrbe. My love, what did you say? But the asrbe. My answer is same there. It's a chanami delay asrbe. Toshma loyim amarta ben nazir. What do we say about nazir tummy? Shekain like it. Toyim b'shvuos hapikad sheina like it. Now it says clearly, but the nazir tummy is going to get malchus. But the kama like it. How can it get malchus? Elamai give asra. Mechlal da'asrbe v'kama toyim b'shvuos hapikad sheina like it. Ava carbon. What do we see from there? You do bring ava carbon ma'isi. My answer is no. Mine like it. De'einai nifter b'malchus. Zok Demar Mechlal the nazir tummy nifter b'malchus. Ha carbon ksebe. Clearly says carbon. My answer is Hasan, the Maisi, the real Havadi, you're bringing a carbon. But the carbon, rather, the reason why you're bringing a carbon is not as a kapara Hasan, the Maisi carbon. Just like a patent, in order to bring Naziris, you have to start off, you need a carbon. Amrua Rabbanon, Kamei de Rava. The Mamish had the Shiloh of Kahana in front of Rava. Amalahu, so Rava tells the Mechlal, the Chilai Aserbei, V'ika Eidim, there was no Asra. However, there's Eidim, Chayev, Kvir, you could be Chayev. That can be. Kviras, Dvarim, Ba'amu. Why in the world should you bring a carbon? You say nothing. It's called Kviras, Dvarim. So this is Rabba's Chiddush. Rabba's Chiddush this is the whole point, that you're not Chayev a carbon when a person's doing a Kvira that's not really relevant. If Eidim know about it, you could say Shekem till tomorrow. You're not really changing anything, therefore you're not Chayev a carbon. Alma, this is the whole point. Alma Kasavar Rabba, Kaivim Mama Sheish Laved and Potter. I'll bring a raya. Says v'kichesh ba prat lemoide le'echem and achin le'echem and ashutvin, and it says v'nishbal shekes prat loiv b'shtar v'loiv b'eidim. So Amalei, Rabbi tells him, no. Amalei, imashum ha, don't bring a raya, loy. See ayon, why? Because by levisi v'loy levisi be'edim, v'loy levisi. He says be'edim levisi v'loy be'edim, or levisi v'loy levisi b'shtar. So Zakh Mar Mai med the Ketani v'kichesh pra prat lemoide le'echem achem le'echem and ashutvin. Hi, so what's the case? He says, I don't owe you $100. Rather, I only you $50. The idach, he's arguing about the other 50. What's the case? Mitavin, and he says, they're trying to say you borrowed from both of us $100. He says, no, I only borrowed from one of you $100. Who really cares? He'll take the 100 and they'll go split it because you reminded that you both borrowed it. So to Seifa, Nami Kfir Star. Now we're going to bring a bunch of rayas to this halacha of Rabbah. Simen chayva kitas the balbayis chaymin is here. Tashma ein a chayev you're not chayev shkogas. So ma chayvels doni chayev osha mekasher shkolim. And my love, what do we think in the Zodan is be'edim? And if it's be'edim, elamai, it's not making a difference to what you're trying to tie up. Mara answers loy. Rather, what are we talking about? It's doin atzmai. Therefore, Rabbah will agree. Tashma yishtei kitein. So Bishma Shni, we understand the Chayv the Kafar Lokat Rishayna. Ela Rishayna, we had this kasha earlier, Mai Mechayva, Hakai Mashnia. So what do we see from here? One Lamazano base element, we have a Raya, the Kfiras Moment is Dafka what? We see a right, Dafka Shieshol of Adam is considered Kfira. Ravina, what are we talking about? Hachma Eskina, Kegai, Shaisa Shnia, Bashas Kfiras, Rishayna, like we saw earlier, Kroivin, Vena Shesayan. If in a shesein are good sitter, geises says mad them roiv goes to misa kamash malon that what hashta mias chayninu v'loy shchivu toshma balabaye shetan tainas gana bebegadim nishma v'ayda ubo edim im etchaloi bo edim hayda the lachas mishal karen chay mishvacham. However, im shabo edim hayda. What do we see from there? Mishalim teshul mekefim. What do you chayv? You chayv asham. Hagam what? Hagam des edim. And my answers are Chenaim, like we just said, Kedar that we're talking about Goisisais. Amal Ravina Avashi. Try to bring another right. Toshma Chamura, Mimena Shevuos Abikadan, Shechayavin of Dynamakos, Valshkagasa, what do you chayv? Asham, Bekesef Shkol. Now, Midikam, like Mechlal Dikaid. And what does it say, Vikam? What does it say? Alshkagasi, Chayv Asham, Bekesef Shkol. So you clearly see a raya, the Chayv and Asham. Amalar Madchi Bamin, Amalar Madchi Bamina Dahid, Amalar Kahana, how does he read it? Anatanilo, Machatanilo, Echad, Daino, the Echash Gagasa, what do you chayv? Asham Mekasim Shkol. Toshma, Loim Amarti Ben Nazir, not Manazir Tommy. What are we saying by Nazir Tommy? She can't like it. Taimar, Beshvuas Abikadan, Sheina like it. So what's the case? Hechadami, either like Edim, am I like it? Elamai, what are you going to have to say? El Pshita, Dika Edim, Viktani, what does it say? Taimar Shvuas Abikadan, Sheina like it. Milkudulai Lucky. And what do you see very clearly? Avakarbon. What do you tell him? Avakarbon, you do bring. Avakarbon, maisi. So it's very clear. You have a bam raya, the lamaisa. A person brings a carbon. And that we're saying tiyufta, the rabba tiyufta. It's taka, percha, and rabba. What rabba wants to tell us that kfir is mamoin. She yeshel of Adam is not considered a kfir. Rabbi Yechanan Amar Koifa b'maman sheyeshel of Adam the loch is chayiv. However, it's b'shtar yapater. So Amar Papa, my time of the Rabbi Yechanan that is mechalik by Adam and shtar. So the Gemara thinks to say Adam avidin the maisi. People could die. However, shtar hamanach. Shtar is like a newspaper; it will never change. Amar Ravuna b'der v'shul our Papa shtar nami over the mirchas. You're right; it's not going to change, but it could get lost, it could get burnt, it could get stolen. Alamar Ravuna b'der v'shul. In the time of the Rabbi Yechanan, you know why? Midu shum navi shtar shiba kakois. Vein mevin carbon. You don't bring what a carbon al kvira shiba kakois. Itmar mashbia a dekarka pliger Rabbi Yechanan b'lazach hadam achayv hadam apoter. This time Rabbi Yechanan is the one who says poter dam apoter. Midam Rabbi Yechanan hakoyf b'mam and sheishol of edim chayiv. However, star poter. And like we just said, the way he touched it. Taka the Gemara says this time. The one is the halachas owner steals a field. Do we say, are you considered a gazlan, and therefore you can't say reish shachal fanecha, or you consider a trespasser, but you can never steal a karka, and therefore comes a flood, reish shachal fanecha. So guys will sod mechaver v'shot v'nar the halach is yichayv lamin loy sod the Rebbe Lazar v'chachavim oimrim loy reish shachal fanecha v'amrina ma'ika miflki. What's the machlokes Rebbe Lazar? Dorish ribuy mute v'rabbanan darshi klal prati. So let's see the tzad. But that's a darsh ribuy mute. It says as follows: the kichsh by me says a ribo. Then it says, because them sumas yad zemiyat. Oy mikol sheishav alav. What do we have? Chazav riba, and therefore what? Riba miyat riba kol. So what would be the riba kol? My riba kol mili. But we always know there's always one miyat. My miyat, after the miyat starts. That's shita Rebbe Lazar. Rabbana dashi klali prati. The kichish by me says a klal. Bit because them sumas yad is oy begazos a prat. Oy mikol sheishav alav chazav klal. What is the difference? Chaza klal prat to klal. Iyatadan elakain prat. Ma prat mefurish davar metal to guf mamoin. So to have kol davar metal to guf mamoin yotzik kakois. Shein metaltel yotza avadam shehukshul kakois yotza storish af bishem metaltelin ein guf mamoin. So Zoktim, our man the Mechayiv is Rebbe Lazar, man the Potter Garbanan. Amalei like man the Mechayiv Rebbe Lazar, man the Potter will tell us no. Amal Chabaha, feel Rebbe Lazar by the Dar Chmana. What does it say? It says, "Oy mikol" to tell us I'm a Kabbalah call. Amar Papa Shmei the Rav Masnisa Nami Dika like this. Tiktani Ganafti Shayri, Bo Amalei Ganafti, Bashbiach Ani Vama Min Chayim. Now Veilu Ganafti Savdai. Like Tani, my time, isn't it? Lav Mishum the Ebed Hiskash Kakais. May Mevin Carbon Kvir Shivak Kakais. I have a bomber higher from the Mishnah. My answers are publishment. The Rabbi a Sefer. What are you going to do with the Sefer? It says Zahaklau. Kol Mishal Piatz Mechayiv. Ve'esha Einem Mishal Piatz Mepotter. Whenever we know Zahaklau, it's coming to include something else. Zahaklau Mesuye Mai Lavla Suye. Are we going to come include Ganaftis Avdi? Elamai Elamaho. You can't bring a Raya B'Chlav from our Mishnah. Lekol and Mashmi. No, Yetz Hashem. Next week we'll pick up from the two dots on Lamed Ches Amid Aleph.